Hello, everyone. We are live. Welcome to the Katie Halper Show. I'm your host, Katie Halper. Have a really great show today, really great lineup. We have with us Shahid Buttar, who is running for Congress against the mighty centrist righty. I just made that up. The mighty centrist righty, Nancy Pelosi. And he's also a lawyer and an activist and a poet and DJ. And then we're going to be joined by Eugene Puryear from Break the Set News. And then Rania Khalek and Leslie Lee. Rania Khalek is, of course, a journalist and video host and producer. And Leslie Lee is a writer and also the host of the Struggle Session podcast. So welcome so much, Shahid. And thank you so much for coming on.
I'm so glad to be with you, Katie. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. What is up in your campaign? What is going on in the world for you? Have you been attending protests? Have you been mostly focused on your campaign? How are you juggling those two things?
The last week have been a lot of protests, and you might think of it as protests at night and campaign stuff during the day. During the shutdown and the isolation period, we haven't been able to do campaign events without putting people at risk. So a lot of our campaign has been phone calls and online. And I'm very proud of our campaign staff. In addition, I've seen any number of supporters. And I was on the street in Oakland on Friday, here in San Francisco last night. And I think it's been a really poignant moment. Our democracy is confronting a whole number of threats. At one point, it was seemingly just the climate crisis, and then with the climate crisis and a pandemic. Now we have both of those with a constitutional crisis. The president is openly threatening martial law. The New York Times is publishing op-eds promoting it. There is a intersecting set of compounding crises that we are confronting. And I'm really proud of my neighbors in having been so visible. When I was walking to the Mission yesterday for the protest gathering there, I got the sense, and drone footage confirmed, there were basically feeder marches from every neighborhood in the city. And, there were tens of thousands of people out in the middle of a pandemic. We all recognize the threat to our neighbors' lives and the threat to our democracy enough to put ourselves at risk in this political moment. And I think that's very profound and meaningful.
So just bringing back the kind of connection between the political side and the organizing side, a lot of people rightly are really angry with the Democrats right now because they think that people are, the Democrats, they're not there. They're not doing enough. There's a lot of lip service. And Nancy Pelosi, it's like every month, I think she has something, she rips up a speech. She does the clapping, which then an entire pseudo feminist analysis text is read out of somehow. And then she had a Bible moment. So I wanted to know what you thought of what's happening now, but also you, when you're congressman, member of Congress, what would you be doing, or what could the Democrats be doing right now concretely, besides just kind of talking about Trump being an existential threat, which he may be, but they're not treating him that way?
Yes, policy. Thank you. Well, and not only are they not treating Trump like an existential threat, but just to be clear, corporate Democrats, particularly Nancy Pelosi, are entirely complicit in the policy apparatus that is driving us all into the street. And I think it's not only is it not enough to display empty acts of theater. And I'll just note that it's even worse when those empty acts of theater are constitutionally offensive, as they are when we violate the separation of church and state. And, our civic test becomes a combination, a battle over who is more Christian devoutly. But there's a further point here that I would make. And that is that we could change policies. That's what policymakers are there for. It's why we call them policymakers. Nancy Pelosi has been one for 30 years. And for her to show up talking about the need for change, pardon me, as a constituent, it just rings hollow. And I know what the changes are. 2 years ago, I put out a 20-point reform platform to transform our criminal justice system. And I'm grateful that two pieces of it have recently gotten wider attention. Just this week, Representative Ilhan Omar and Representative Justin Amash from either side of the partisan aisle came together to support a measure that would effectively end qualified immunity. This is a judge-created doctrine that enables killer cops and violent police to escape accountability for their crimes. And I proposed ending it 2 years ago. They just introduced that bill in Congress this week. Another measure that I proposed 2 years ago was to defund, through federal funding, local law enforcement agencies that violate civil rights. Senator Bernie Sanders has embraced that since. The other planks of our platform include creating a national registry of killer cops. At least 2 prolific incidents, not only the cop who killed George Floyd was a repeat offender, but also the police officer who killed Tamir Rice in Cleveland some years ago had just been fired from another police department a handful of months before a 12-year-old ended up dead in a park within seconds of this guy getting out of his squad cruiser. And the police chief from the first department that fired him said this man should never be a police officer. And so what happens? He ends up getting hired by the Cleveland Police Department, and then Tamir Rice ends up dead at the end of it. And this sordid cycle of cops being able to get rehired even when they disqualify themselves and prove their unreliability. At the very least, I mean, we're talking about criminal predation by paid public servants here, just to be clear. And, I'm all for respecting public servants and respecting the risks that they invite on themselves, but in no way are police in any way authorized to prey on communities. And that's what policing has become in this country. We have to stop it.
It's funny because you mentioned at the beginning how it's extra offensive when Slay Queen moments are violations of the separation of church and state. And you just reminded me the way you're talking about what happens with the police. It reminds me of the Catholic Church a bit with the shuffling around, right? And it's not just one bad apple. There's a systemic immunity, so to speak, of moving people around, and you get someone kicked out of one parish and then not all Catholics. Obviously, I'm a Jew for Jesus. I'm not religious. I just think Jesus was a good man.
Indeed.
Indeed.
A socialist organizer.
A socialist organizer. I mean, not just because I'm Jewish do I like him. He's a nice Jewish boy. But it does seem to be something. So, and I have a lot of respect also for liberation theology. But I think we can all agree that there's an institutional problem with shielding abusers, and that's how it's functioned. People, one person is kicked out and there's not like a coordinated effort to make sure that person isn't in that job again. And so they hop from place to place.
And a registry would help fix that.
Exactly.
It's as simple as just tracking the data and making it available. And that's a tool that requires congressional intervention. No state legislature can do that, at least not for the country. No city council can do that. It takes Congress. And Congress has been led effectively by Nancy Pelosi for the last generation. And so for her to, show up talking about the need for change, again, I don't buy it, because if she meant it, she would have done it. Nothing kept her from doing it, particularly under the Obama administration. They had majorities in every chamber, and they had the White House. They could have passed radical criminal justice reform then, and they did not do it. I'll tell a quick story here. In 2010, I was an advocate in Washington, D.C. I was leading a civil rights organization called the Bill of Rights Defense Committee. I'm in a meeting with, he was still with us at the time, Chairman John Conyers was the chair of the House Judiciary Committee at the time. And I asked his staff in the meeting, when are you going to reintroduce the End Racial Profiling Act? IRPA had been introduced in every session of Congress since it was almost passed in 2001. And the staff of the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee says to us, this is summer 2010, so the Obama administration had been in for a little bit by this point, and they said we are waiting for the administration's support. And the story of the Obama administration on Capitol Hill was waiting for the administration's support. It never showed up to support the End Racial Profiling Act, and that's the very first thing we should have done 6 years ago when the Ferguson uprising happened. And I've been in the street in Ferguson, in Washington D.C., in New York, across the Bay Area. And I'm eager to take the movement's demands into Congress. We need someone willing to fight for our communities and to put our communities before their careers. And frankly, in this context, when we're talking about policing and the authority, or I should say the right for people not to be arbitrarily murdered by paid public servants, then it's not just putting our communities first. This is the oath of office. They all already swear an oath to put the Constitution first, but they haven't done it, which is exactly why we have to change the generation of policymakers who have, quite frankly, failed on the job so dramatically over the last generation. And
when you say you put together a platform and with all these points, you were doing that in preparation for running, or
it was during our 2018 campaign.
Okay,
and I had the benefit of some volunteers who wield some expertise as legal advocates, and I won't out the names of one of them, but I'll just share the thing that she had done before coming to us and writing this platform was serving as one of the last clerks for the first African-American judge appointed to the federal bench. And to have her insight with the value of that experience informing the platform was frankly invaluable. And it's one of the things that made our criminal justice reform platform, until Bernie's 2020 platform, ours in 2018 was the most visionary, transformative criminal justice reform platform I'd seen written anywhere. I mean, we did it by taking the movement for Black lives and the immigrant rights movements with the ACLU and EFF's work and remixing it all. And like, how do we fix a broken predatory system? I mean, the only place I push back on myself here is a lot of people say the system isn't broken. It's working just as designed. Yeah. And I'll accept that. I think it's true. And we have to redesign it to have better outcomes that actually reflect justice.
Right. It's a, what is it? It's a bug. It's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, exactly. Michelle Alexander, obviously the new Jim Crow, talks about that. And she herself seemed to be, based on, her book, she was surprised by how much she was built into it. Alex Vitale has also written The End of Policing. And so that's another huge question and debate, like what does change even look like? And I have to make a confession. I saw something with some demands, and I thought it was a different organization's demands. It was DeRay's, and it was like 8 things that are pretty not very reforming. So I had to take that tweet down. But it's on me. I mean, I tweeted out, but there is a whole debate over this, and and how do you do that in a way that's organized? And you want to get the most that you can, but you also want it to be, I guess you demand the most, right? It's like, it's kind of like, yeah. We
can't enter as a movement into legislative negotiations as if we're at the negotiating table. Right. Frankly, right. I mean, this is one of the fallacies that has infected the left for entirely too long. We enter these policy debates with moderate conclusions prefigured, understanding that the other side is out for blood. And while the right wing has been swinging for the fences for 70 years, right, Democrats have been showing up for these policy battles with one hand behind their back, seeking reasonable compromises and getting rolled time and time again. I am not that sort. I don't need to be popular. I've taken unpopular positions for 20 years. When I was fighting for gay rights in the courts, it wasn't popular. Democrats did not support marriage equality when I was among the first advocates for it in the courts. When I, was at Stanford organizing against the war, that's a campus that tends to favor militarism, right? So like that. Also, I've taken unpopular positions for a long time, and I do it because I do the right thing. And I think that an entire generation is coming to realize that for a long time we've had policymakers who make other choices, who make their choices for their careers and their corporate donors first. And I'm not interested in that. And I don't think it's what our country needs in this political moment.
Right. And you were critical of, who did you get arrested for yelling at? Clapper?
James Clapper.
Clapper, yeah.
Clapper, yeah. I'd love to have a chance to ask a question of Brennan, but a
boy can dream.
I'd rather not get arrested doing it. I mean, one of the privileges of being a member of Congress is you get to ask questions and people have to answer you.
Right.
And the last time I asked a question in Congress, I was arrested because they didn't like the question.
Right.
And,
but once you're on the inside, you get to ask whatever question you want.
Yeah. I'm eager to get some answers for all of us.
Right. And that wasn't popular to be critical of the, it's funny. It's like, it wasn't popular to be critical of the quote unquote intelligence community under Obama, because Obama is the good liberal guy. But under Trump, because Trump is so bad, and he is bad. I'm not a Trumpist, Trumpian, Trump defender, Trump apologist. But under Trump, somehow the intelligence community is once again reified for different reasons.
Because they came out against the president. Yeah, it's an entirely partisan inflection of what we should recognize. I look at this through a warning issued by their architects. The very first president to oversee the creation of these agencies told us that they would strangle democracy unless we as a people were knowledgeable and alert. And he said it on national television. It's an incredibly important speech, and people have forgotten it. And it has such incredibly important connotations for now, when we have a subsequent president actually inviting, in the New York Times writing op-eds, inviting the domestic military deployment to quell domestic dissent to which we are constitutionally entitled for a reason, because it's us before the government. That's what the Constitution means. When we swear oaths of office to the Constitution, part of the oath is we swear an oath to the people before the institutions. And the fundamental failing of Nancy Pelosi, corporate Democrats, the GOP, all of Washington, as far as I'm concerned, is that they have put institutions before the American people for too damn long. And I'm not here for that. We're here to shrug off that yoke and usher in a brighter future.
All right. Okay. Full disclosure. I need to grab a tissue. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. Someone post your questions for Shahid. I'm putting this in the chat. But
okay.
If someone doesn't, then my question for you, which I asked you about and I think is really interesting, is how your biography shaped your political outlook and your journey. Yeah. So I'll be right back.
Okay.
No longer an issue.
I got you.
Hide myself for a second.
I remember when I was with Katie in November, her asking me a little bit about my story, my immigration story from my intergenerational history, and I would say that it inflects my ideology. I sometimes say that I put the D back in democratic socialism because democracy to me is very precious, and it's also I recognize how fragile it is. That's one reason, it's one perspective that I think having a foot from another place might help, because I don't take for granted norms that I think many Americans do. The presumption of innocence is a norm that I take very seriously, and apparently police don't so much, because if they did, George Floyd would still be with us. And so would Mike Brown, and so would Oscar Grant, and so would Mario Woods, and so would Alex Nieto, and so would Sandra Bland, all of them, right? Every time we say their names, one of the things we are lamenting is the loss of the presumption of innocence and due process. These are core, fundamental, constitutional norms that are still good law. They are respected on the paper, just not on the ground. And as an immigrant who puts a great deal of value in these principles, I'm not willing to just stand by and watch them be derogated. I've never been willing to watch and stand by and watch them be derogated. In my mind, that's part of just being an American citizen. And I think I put such a great deal of value in the opportunity to have grown up here. I'm very deeply thankful for all of the opportunities that this country has afforded me and my family, and frankly, generations of people from all around the world. It's the thing that makes me so rabidly patriotic, is that we are, I think, perhaps one of the world's first, with the possible exception of England, but like nation polyglot countries. The entire world is represented within our shores. And I think that's really profound. I think there's something poignant there. And I see at this moment in our history, our leaders rending that fabric apart at great cost. And I see at the same time, our collected communities across all our races and all our ages and all our genders and all our persuasions and orientations, we're all out there in the streets, shoulder to shoulder, even when it's not safe to do it, to resist these institutions and declare that Black lives matter, our neighbors matter, due process matters, the presumption of innocence matters. If I weren't an immigrant, and if I weren't Muslim, and if I hadn't, been in the crosshairs of the right-wing attack on vulnerable communities for the last 20 years, would I have the same perspective? I'm not necessarily sure. I can't say that I would or I wouldn't, but I do think that part of my biography and my story definitely inflects my history. Another way I'd put this is that up until 2001, when I was in law school, most of my concerns had particularly been with the S in socialism. I went to law school to learn antitrust law so I could bust big corporations for the American people. The S in socialism, at least trying to push that vector forward. And while I was there, a constitutional crisis erupted. And in the years since, I've been responding to that. So, I've had a chance to work on both sides of that coin, and I'm thankful for that. And again, I think my immigrant experience is one reason why my attention was forced to civil liberties, even if economics were the first object of my passion in political economy.
Got it. You can see me now, right?
I can, yeah. Okay, I'm just reading the comments. I'm glad you're back.
Oh, yeah. So the S in socialism, I think I missed that. What is that as opposed to the
D? So the democratic socialism, I think of the S as
it.
connoting our aspirations to economic equality, to public ownership, to liberating people from the chains of wage slavery, right? To being able to collectively share the fruits of our civilization. The D I think of as just preserving the levers for us to seek those aims. The D in my mind is offended by things like vote suppression or executive secrecy that inhibits congressional oversight, or the process restrictions that inhibit our democracy as a process. And then socialism for me is the goal of that process, to distribute resources more equitably.
What do you think about the recent op-ed that the New York Times ran? I mean, I find this fascinating to talk to you about because it's such an intersection of law questions, free speech questions, hate speech. I don't know. Is it like calling fire? You know, what is it, saying fire in a crowded building in a way? What the role of the press is, whether it's appropriate to, you know, bother the New York Times, criticize them, call on someone to be fired. I mean, legally, that's okay, right? Because it's not the government doing it. You tell me what your thoughts are on it. And I wonder if your thoughts on this are different as a jurist, as a politician, and as an activist.
Nice. Thank you for disaggregating, because you just nailed it, actually. I do have very different views in each of those capacities. So just to put on a jurist hat or robe, as it were, it's perfectly legal. Right. I mean, the First Amendment
to run the piece, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, the right of the press to publish a diversity of views is something that we take pride in as a society, as a legal matter. And that's one thing. And I wouldn't recommend that the law intervene here. And I wouldn't recommend that we try to seek solace in the law here, because remember who runs the government at the moment. If we invite the law as a restriction on the press, we are inviting open censorship by the tyrant himself. Second, if we look at it as the jurist was one capacity, and then it was a policymaker the other?
Jurist, politician, and activist.
An activist, right. As a politician, I would just say I'm disappointed, because maybe I'm outraged. I'm certainly outraged personally, and I'm having a hard time disaggregating those perspectives myself. And here's why. The New York Times in particular knows better, owes better, and frankly has failed in precisely this way before. And I blame the New York Times for George Bush, particularly in 2004. I tweeted about this earlier today. In 2004, George Bush won the 2004 election. Or I should say he was selected. There were all kinds of, hijinks in Ohio.
Lots of people think he didn't win, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the election, frankly, every election.
Oh, 2004, right? That one too. Yeah, right.
Every election for the last 20 years has been suspect. We haven't addressed any of the election vulnerabilities, even from the 2000 election, and they've grown worse since the right-wing Supreme Court in the Shelby County decision struck down Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. And now I've distracted myself.
Sorry. What did I? Oh, because you were talking about George. Oh, blaming the New York Times for George Bush.
So the Times sat for over a year on the story of warrantless surveillance, the very same story that Edward Snowden gave us the documents for in 2013. In 2004, the New York Times heard from the first of the whistleblowers, Mark Klein. He was an AT&T whistleblower who found right here in San Francisco that the AT&T switching office in south of Market was duplicating all the signals. And it was an earthquake when it was finally disclosed in December 2005. Over a year later, with an election in between, it was an earthquake. It almost stopped John Roberts from being confirmed to a seat on the Supreme Court. And if that fact were known, that Bush had authorized in secret, plainly illegal surveillance, because at this point, Congress hadn't bent over backward to authorize the illegal actions of the military-industrial complex. It was still plainly illegal, and the Times sat on the story. And that's the only reason Bush survived that election. There's no way he wins that election if out in the open is the fact that he's spying on the American people in violation of our statutory and constitutional rights. And in the 20 years since, there's never been a debate. Just to close this loop, Nancy Pelosi, at every opportunity, has gone to bat to preserve those spying authorities. And most recently, she has revived them from the dead. They actually expired in March as the pandemic was hitting. And the only reason they expired was Pelosi recessed Congress and wasn't there to defend them. And then she came back from the recess to reimpose these spying powers. And the idea that Democrats are supposedly resisting Trump, who's calling for martial law while handing him domestic surveillance authorities, it's so sordid, because it's not just politically weak. That's the point I would make. It is politically complicit, and it is constitutionally disqualifying. It is authoritarianism that is my central concern at the moment. I see fascism rising under our feet, and I see Democrats entirely complicit, and we cannot allow that to happen. Finally, as an activist looking at the Times, I would just say I'm over it. I canceled my subscription to the Times years ago, and I don't understand why anyone would subscribe to it. It's a private business making editorial decisions supported by their subscribers. And if you think that the Times is disregarding its constitutional function and a free press, here's the way I'd put it. I think the Times is self-marginalizing, because in the fascist state they invite, you don't get to do investigative reporting. And I would just invite the editors at the Times to consider their own damn self-interest or journalism as a profession, if not the Republic or communities of color. And it took marginalizing all those things, communities of color, our democracy, journalism, and the Times itself to make that decision. I'm profoundly disappointed in the editors there. And I frankly think we all deserve better. I'm guessing that Katie might have lost her signal, so I'll do what I can to try to field the question from the comments here. Feel free to throw one in if you have any. Somebody shouts out voter suppression. Yeah, vote suppression is a concern, certainly for me. California, I'll go both ways on this. On the one hand, California is a model state with respect to voting rights, particularly because we have an independent redistricting commission that prevents our state legislators from doing what they do in other states, teaming up with each other to contrive maps that marginalize voters and contrive their own reelection. We don't have that particular problem here in California. San Francisco also, even before the pandemic, long had vote by mail, and it was the majority of the city voted. So we've been well prepared for that particular problem too. At the same time, I learned just the other day, I had the opportunity to speak with investigative journalist Greg Palast, whose work I would highly recommend if anybody hasn't had a chance to encounter it before. And he educated me about vote purges in California exceeding the numbers in any other state. And we've all heard about the purges, for instance, in Florida leading up to the 2000 election. And that's really the hole in the bucket. That's why George Bush, we were just talking about his 2004 reelection and the New York Times role in that. The reason he got in 2000 was because a massive number, I think that just something like 500,000 black voters, particularly black voters, were disenfranchised in Florida. And that problem has grown only more pernicious in the years since. So vote suppression in the contemporary context, even here in California, is a concern. And this is one of the reasons I say that I'm concerned about the D in democratic socialism. I've described this in some context as a house crumbling from all sides. We've talked briefly about surveillance, and the reason I'm concerned about it is that it inhibits dissent. People have a harder time raising their voices when they know they're being watched, especially if they're vulnerable. Another threat is the secrecy that keeps Congress from doing its job, that keeps the courts from doing their jobs. Another threat is voting rights. We're losing the opportunity to participate in our elections. That's what all of the right-wing attacks on voting rights since the Shelby County decision have done. All the voter ID laws, all of the, you see this all over the country, the voter purges and others, the limitations of voting machines in low-income areas, just a few examples. And just for the record, I'll shut up after this. The fourth house that is crumbling is our judiciary, and we had a chance to mention that before. So the vote suppression is a real problem. It's one among a compounding set of intersecting problems that preceded even the pandemic and our constitutional crisis.
Apologies, I had a tech issue, but I'm going to pretend that I'm actually just trying to prepare you to be really good on your feet so you can take on Nancy Pelosi. So you're welcome. So we are going to bring in, let's bring in our next guest, who I'm really excited to have. And everyone, I'm going to do a little thing. Let's see. I'm going to do Eugene Puryear. Are you here with us?
I am here with you. Hey, Katie. Hey, Shahid. Good to be reunited with you, at least virtually, man.
Great to see you again. Yeah, it's been a while.
I'm just going to do a little plug on the Twitters and tell everyone to come over here. And I'm going to,
While you're doing that, can I tell a quick story? Eugene and I know each other from back in DC. We've been in the streets together on any number of issues a decade or more now, I think.
That's right.
And on some of these issues entirely too damn long, I dare say.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I mean, it felt kind of cosmic, to be here in a way in this moment, given that we have that history. And, I think the good continuity, I think, of struggle that we've seen, sort of a revival. I mean, I really appreciated you talking about the Bush era when I was also radicalized as a young person in high school, leading walkouts against the Iraq War. And it's just been so powerful to be out here with this. I'm not that old, I'm 34, but to see like these people my age when I was getting excited, like coming out in huge numbers when, we were out there with Breakthrough News in Minneapolis, like seeing these high school kids, middle school kids, like fired up out there and making their voices heard was inspiring.
Yeah, as dark as this moment is in the macro sphere, I see especially the young folks and like this generation, They are not having it. I mean, it's a totally, you know, I kind of feel like the game is, can we keep our democracy alive long enough for them to get their hands on the reins? And if we do, it's going to be a totally different world tomorrow. And that's the task of the moment, is just keep our democracy on life support and humanity alive through the pandemic and the climate crisis, and let this next generation fix the failures of the past. I'm so excited by the young ones and all their inspiration and energy and creativity and insight.
And I was derelict because I was so excited to have you guys connect and kibitz, if you will. But Eugene, I just want to provide his biography, well, a snippet of it, because he's so prolific. It's so funny when you mention your age. I'm like, how are you that young? You're a journalist. You used to host a radio show, By Any Means Necessary. You have run for office twice. You were
I've run for office 3 times. I've run twice as a vice presidential candidate of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and once as the Statehood Green Party, DC Statehood now, by the way, candidate for at-large council in 2014.
And now you are at a new news, what do you call it? News organization? What do we call it?
I mean, I don't know. Our tagline is, we're the media arm of the movement. I don't know. Some people would say I'm probably not a journalist and I'm too partisan to be one. But, I feel like we're very much in the spirit of engaged, radical journalism in this country, from, New Masses to In Fact to the great muckrakers and all who, obviously we're reporting what's out there, but, we're also not blind to the fact that, things are happening for reasons, and, really illuminating that and lifting up the people going after the root causes is super important. So Breakthrough News, you can watch us here on YouTube.
I'll put a link to that.
You're not publishing any op-eds inviting martial law?
Not as of yet. Although that appears to be the way to get published these days in the Great Ladies. So, I mean, unbelievable.
I thought it was so funny how he actually, the guy who published it, apologized. He didn't apologize. He's like, we owe it to our readers to provide diverse views. And especially when held by people who are setting policy. It's like, you just said the quiet part aloud. Like, you're supposed to pretend to have, I guess, some commitment maybe to raising voices. It's like, who will speak for the status quo, incredibly powerful, in this case, straight white man, although it does not always have to be that. But like, who's going to give voice to the totally already voiced?
That is the same shit that Mark Zuckerberg says about the president.
Right.
What do you mean?
Exact same thing, that he wants to.
Right.
It's supposedly performing a public function to let us hear from these powerful people with their hands around our necks.
Yeah,
right.
And my attitude too is, okay, if you're performing a public function, then where's like our public control over what you do? Like, for Mark Zuckerberg to even say, like, his solution, we're going to set up a Facebook Supreme Court of people like picked by me, paid by me, and under my control. But trust me, like, that's going to be the transparent thing. Like, cool, you want to perform a public service, then you're a public utility, and maybe you shouldn't even be a private company. When we talk about the role that Facebook, Google, all these institutions play in our lives, I mean, I think it's questionable the like legal status they're allowed to hold, and the sort of fiction that they're just these private corporations, neither here nor there, just making these decisions on the fly. I mean, they're really, in fact, controlling so much of what we see and hear, how it's, categorized and how it's hierarchically presented to us. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I want to turn that argument back on him, just like how he says he is all about having no privacy, but he bought the 6 homes around him in San Francisco so that no one could know where he lives or ever spy on him or whatever.
And didn't he also like ruin Hawaii, or try to ruin some Hawaiian area, some like sacred indigenous place that he was trying to dig up to build a really nice house or something?
I thought that was the Spotify guy, Sean Parker, who had the thing in the Redwood Forest, like the Lord of the Rings themed wedding that apparently like cut down some tree that was like 100. I don't even know the story. But
I don't know that, but I do know that there's a thing. Because how I know that is what's his name, the DSA guy? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name. Who ran for Congress in Hawaii.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I can picture his face.
Yeah,
but
I know. Anyway, wow, I'm sorry. I know you. I've had you on my show. I've emailed with you. I've tweeted you, and I can't remember now. And if someone can write in the thing,
Daniela Ng.
Daniela Ng. Yeah, phew, okay, yeah.
Thank you to Mason.
Yeah, thank you, Mason. Yeah, let me. We owe it to.
Can I say one thing here on the subject
course,
that Eugene brought up, the Facebook oversight board that they supposedly claim legitimacy in, and that grounds their decisions in some kind of, independent authority. One of the members of that oversight board is a professor at my alma mater at Stanford Law School, and the students there are up in arms because he dropped the N-word in class, refused to apologize for it. Yeah, and there's a whole campaign by Stanford law students in school right now about Michael McConnell, who's on the Facebook oversight board, which is to say, even if it had any teeth, which is not clear, its composition is suspect. And I don't think we should be satisfied by that standard at all. Eugene's certainly right insofar as if there are public functions and they're going to claim some utility as a public enterprise or service to the rest of us, there should be public oversight and control, if not ownership.
Yeah. It's funny. Matt Taibbi and I talk about this a lot, and it's always an interesting issue and debate. And my thing really is that, well, there are two issues. One is that it's total BS about providing multiple views and diverse opinions, because I think it was Vanessa B, who writes for Current Affairs, who said, okay, I'm looking forward to the New York Times publishing an op-ed by an Antifa CEO.
Right.
Do that. It's fine. Do that. If you want to have just the freedom to, sure, do it. The thing that bothers me is it pretends to be neutral and just letting all sides speak. Yep. And it's not. It's obviously favoring the powerful. Right. And they should have an Antifa person write an op-ed. They should have a person who is a protester who was physically attacked, by the police write an op-ed. How many Palestinians, have they had write an op-ed for them? So again, it's this, that's the real danger, because I don't know what the solution is. Anyway, that's a whole other issue. But I also I don't trust Facebook or Twitter to be fact checking or stuff. So
no, you shouldn't. You absolutely can. It's a real danger. We have a habit sometimes of inviting solutions that are worse than the problem we're trying to fix. Police body cameras are an example of this. Many people thought at one point the body cameras were going to help. I wrote an article in 2015 warning body cameras are a surveillance vector and they don't promise accountability. Cops have gotten away with murdering people in public on camera. George Floyd is only the most recent. Remember Eric Garner?
Yeah, of course.
There's been others. The camera doesn't solve anything. What you need is a law that allows people to hold cops responsible. That's why we have to end qualified immunity. Right. You need prosecutors who are willing to do their jobs. That's why we need to elect people like Wesley Bell in St. Louis, like Chase Saboudin here in San Francisco. He got
the Katie Halper show bump.
He did indeed. Yeah, that's right.
And then he won. I'm just saying, yeah.
But it takes all these parts, and it's the failure of the establishment.
I've very much heard and I agree with the body cameras are insufficient, but do they not help at all with raising awareness, a sense of outrage? And I get how you can shut them off and then that makes it look like, but it seems like they have, and I get that it's not enough. You can't have the outrage without the legal policy that has, teeth to it. But are they not, should they be gotten, are you suggesting that they be gotten rid of totally, or what's the
big difference between dash cams and body cams? First of all, because dash cams capture context and a body camera doesn't. So you don't get to see what the cop does with a body cam. That's one problem. So it inherently privileges the police perspective. So yes, I think it is worse than nothing. There have been examples of body camera footage that has led to outrage, fewer examples of that footage leading to accountability. And that's the point. Accountability is what we need. At the best, a body camera gives you transparency into an incident. What we need transparency into is patterns and practices. And a body camera doesn't give you any of that, right? We need accountability for patterns of racial profiling. We need an end to the qualified immunity doctrine so that when cops beat someone up, they're subject to the same criminal standards as the rest of us, that they aren't given these benefits from a law that they abuse in the service of hurting people that they're charged to serve and protect, no less. And these are policy changes we can make. Eugene, do you have thoughts here?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate all those points. And I think so much of this, And so much of the response that we have to these incidents of policing is, it's so raw in the moment that there's always sort of a jump to like, okay, well, what is the thing we can make the police do to make this end? And I think we lose sight of the fact that ultimately, it's when you put all the pieces together, the whole of policing is basically this, right? The police are there to enforce the law. Well, who makes the laws? And ultimately, when you really start to think about that, then the role of the police itself has to be questioned in a deeper way. I think crime is like, quote unquote, crime is the only issue we deal with like this. Like, I think you would be roundly, everyone would hate you if you said, what would be great if, like, of all the people who had cancer, we just had like 16% less of people with cancer. No, people are like, no, let's eliminate cancer. But when it comes to this sort of deeper underlying role with policing, we play on the society plays on these primal fears of fear about this very violent society, really the social consequences of the neoliberal devastation of our society. And rather than sort of question, like, what are the root causes of this thing? Like, everything that happens has a reason. Like, even if someone says, well, someone just had a mental health issue, or like what the average person may say, well, that person was quote unquote crazy. Well, like, you know what? That also, there are reasons why people are affected by certain things in certain ways. And if we get to the root, we can start to question of why we even really need the police.
Right.
And I think to a large degree, the police exist because we have so much difference and so much inequality in our society. There's such a need to keep the society from totally going off the rails. You basically have to hold the lid on a boiling pot. And I think that's a lot of what policing is. And until we look at some of those deeper rooted causes, we're just never going to get beyond the constant conversation, because it's not really the training. It's not really, it is these things, and all those things are relevant, but they're only sort of symptomatic of the deeper challenge, which is that the role policing is playing is inherently, discriminatory.
Right. Yeah. It's fun. It's interesting because I feel like there is a moment, a potential weird nonpartisan or post-partisan something movement around this, because even like hard on people who don't have empathy for quote unquote criminals, who don't have empathy at all, but are just like fiscal conservatives and maybe a little libertarian. I mean, I know there are all these private prison initiatives, but there does seem to be some kind of, drug legalization, decriminalization. And if I think that the data of how badly this stuff works, like the recidivism rates, that I think there's a way without ceding the moral ground and without like, pretending that people who are in jail are human beings. I mean, I think there's a potential for a very kind of strategic alignment or something, or just like shifting the narrative. So even people who will not come to where we are politically on most issues see like this isn't tough on crime, and this isn't good financially. Like, it's a lot of money and it doesn't make us safer.
I think it's already happened insofar as like the loudest voices you can find to demilitarize police often are libertarian voices. And, they're not necessarily the ones saying Black Lives Matter. Like, they're coming at it from a very different perspective. Right. And from that perspective, the thing that's inhibiting transformative criminal justice reform is not the GOP. It's the center. And this is an important point to make. People sometimes think that the GOP is the enemy, and it is certainly for people like us part of it. But the authoritarians are centrists in both parties. And that's a critical point for people to recognize. When we're out in the streets, we can't focus only on Trump. I heard a lot of, expletive Trump. And every time I'd be like under my breath, and Pelosi.
Right.
We can't pretend if we keep sending the same Democrats back to Congress that we're going to have anything different. And it's to recognize these harms as a superstructure that is bipartisan, an establishment that transcends party, I think, is a critical part of the current analysis that we have to take into account as we're taking action now to defend our most basic principles.
Yeah. Eugene, I wanted to ask you if you could share with me and Shahid and all of our listeners and viewers some of the things that you saw in Minneapolis, because, I heard you being interviewed by soon-to-be guest, repeat offender for me, my show, Rania Khalek, and you said that there were a lot of moments of humanity and that weren't covered by the media. And I coincidentally had Johanna Fernandez, who I don't know if you guys know her. She's a big Mamiya advocate. She's a historian and professor at Baruch. wrote about the Young Lords, but she was saying that there is like a level of revelry and that she hasn't experienced either ever or in a long time at a rally. So yeah, I was wondering if you could talk about those moments that, you know, in an ideal world, the media would be actually focusing on.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I really appreciate, Johanna, and I can definitely lift up her recent book about the Young Lords. I really hope people pick that up and check it out. I think so many things on a few different levels. I mean, one, I'll just start at the level she laid it out, the sort of revelry in the sense of it. On last Friday night when I was there in Minneapolis, there was a moment just before the curfew came down where they sort of brought all these state police and National Guard like right up to the front. They start putting on the gas masks and the whole nine. They got they got assault rifles, like really trying to kind of intimidate people as like, you might as well leave now, rather than experience the wrath we're going to unleash on you. Of course, people did not leave. And, ultimately they did the whole, this is an unlawful assembly order that they do over the sound thing. And still nobody really moves. And, at that point in time, the police start backing up because I think they realize the crowd was not going to be cowed. So, they start to get back to a certain distance and then just start shooting tear gas. Obviously, the goal to sort of break up the assembly, right, and try to get people disassembled. And, hundreds of people just march forward through this tear gas. And the police just keep going back. They're shooting tons of tear gas. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, they're trying to keep people from gathering in front of the 3rd precinct, which the night before had burned down, and which had become kind of like, this is where this officer is based out of. There was sort of a spiritual feeling, I think, to that spot, because, it was indicative of the I think the justified and righteous feelings, and I can come back to that people were having in the street. So anyway, long story short, they realize they can't hold it and they throw down a bunch of smoke and the cops leave. And then like in that moment, just the euphoria of people feeling like they had reclaimed some sense of power in themselves that had been stripped of them. And that I think like the feeling of you don't even think the system is going to do that much to this guy. And you feel he's been undercharged, that he's going to get off, that you're not being heard. And the sense and the feeling, and there's people coming out from the community and you could just see in people's faces the feeling like they had reclaimed something that had been lost. And I think that, it's hard for people to, look at it that way because I think it's presented so much as like this wanton violence, which is like also not it. I mean, I can tell you this, like having been there all along East Lake Street, yes, I definitely saw things get burned down, cars, buildings, whatever. But if this was some sort of secret foreign plot to like make America look bad, everything on East Lake Street would have been burned down. And that was not the case at all. And you saw so many buildings with Black Lives Matter, justice for George Floyd, all these powerful messages that were not burned down, and some stuff was burned down because, fires were set and it grew over. But it wasn't this mass chaos of like every single building burned down and wanton violence. It was really just like I said, like that boiling pot. And you could just feel this sense. I mean, we're marching down, and this may be the final little piece of the story, because I do want to tell about some of the repression I saw too, which I think is serious. Yeah. And cars just kept joining this march on Friday. It seemed like people were like calling people and just like picking people up and coming over there, coming mainly from the Black community of Minneapolis, people turning like they were waiting at stoplights, waiting for the march to pass, turning into it and becoming a part of it. And so like, yeah, like 2 cars did get burned along the course of it. And that could be all you could take away from it. But there was just this liberatory feeling of people feeling like, yes, we've reclaimed this ground. We are Minneapolis. Like we are standing up for justice for George Floyd, and we won't be denied by anybody that was like so strong and so powerful. But the next night on Saturday, there's some unbelievable. I don't know. I don't want to talk too long, so I'll stop here. But I think Saturday in Minneapolis, I think everyone sort of knew what was going on who wanted to come out to protest, because the governor, Tim Walz, had come on early that morning and said it's outside agitators. He'd even referenced that the drug cartels had been sending agents into there. There's all these accusations of violence and this, that, and the third. So thousands of people came out in the day determined to defy the curfew, but like people knew what was going on. And so everyone was just in like super peaceful mode, 100%, like whatever people has, I think, like deeper philosophical feelings were, everyone realized like, okay, fine. If you want to try to make this about something else, we're going to like turn it back around on you and show like the real agents of chaos are the police. So there's thousands of people sitting by the 5th precinct where, you know, had gotten famous the night before because the Wells Fargo burn. People just sitting there, demanding justice for George Floyd on the ground. At one point, you know, it split. Some people want to march. I mean, they also want to peacefully march. People are chanting hands up, don't shoot. Very peaceful, but they also wanted to show like we have the right, you know, under the First Amendment as human beings, really, to be out here and to demand this justice. And this is what you say. You say you want peaceful protests, so here it is. That was the way worse repression than the night before. And I think it speaks to what it was really about, which was quelling the movement, not stopping the chaos. But, you know, I saw this completely peaceful march just, you know, randomly shot up with tear gas. And while I'm there, other people from our team are back at where people are sitting down by the 5th precinct, just sitting down, and there's so much gas. People were forced to flee into surrounding communities. Everyone around there had to close their windows because there's gas closing in. And so then the police set up this line basically to keep people from getting too close to the 5th precinct, where some, you know, I would say brave protesters had gotten back there and were going to, you know, stand their ground and, you know, the right that people should be there and be allowed to protest. So we're trying to get through, and, you know, we're sort of like pulling up to what's like clearly a checkpoint, and it's a little veiled. And like what appear to be laser rifle sights, like the red dot in the movie, are then being pointed at us, and like they're flashing at us with flashlights. So I tell the person on our team, I'm like, back up. I think that, you know, they're aiming maybe live rounds at us. So we pull out, we go around. And so then one of my cameramen were like, okay, let's see if we can maybe go around and like make it on foot and see if we can get back there somehow. And so we're going down another street, and we're getting close, and we can see there's kind of like a checkpoint, and there's like 5 or 6 guys from the community. Shout out to these guys who are out on their porch, and they were like, don't go any
Russian
further.
flags, right?
Of course, praising Putin, drinking vodka, the whole nine. And they were like, don't go any further. And they were like, they're going to shoot at you. And we were like, what? And they were like, yeah, they've shot at 2 cars already. So I didn't see it myself, but like they definitely were like, do not go any further. And we're fearful that we would be shot potentially with live rounds. And this is what they had been talking about during the day. They had said the National Guard is authorized, if they think they're defending themselves, to use live rounds. So, I mean, you know, just that kind of repression. And again, the only things that had happened all day Saturday up to this point were like people marching saying hands up, don't shoot, people sitting on the ground saying justice for George Floyd, and a bunch of rightfully impassioned speeches and rallies, and a great banner was dropped right by the 5th precinct from a light pole. I mean, just, you know, nothing that could have been considered chaotic or whatever, but that was the day they chose to unleash the most brutal repression. And it, you know, I think shows who they really are.
Yeah. Well, Shahid, do you want to, I know you have been super generous with your time and are running for office and need to take down the Democratic Party and implement it. But
I'm happy to bounce, but can I just add a thought here on that point? You know, one, the connection between violence and property destruction is attenuated. If violence is when people get hurt, and the only people I've seen be violent are cops, just to be clear about that. And when we talk about looting, the looting that I've seen, or at least that we've read about over the last millennium from Black communities, vastly dwarfs the property destruction of the last week. And so, you know, I've heard all this conversation about the looting and the property, and I'm just over it. That's ridiculous. You know, you can restock a business, you can rebuild a Target. You cannot bring George Floyd back to life, or any of the other people whose names that we are forced to recite, you know, in these increasingly long litanies. A couple other points came to mind that might, you know, that slipped my mind, but just, I'm so glad you were there on the ground, Eugene. And again, I'm so just proud of all the people around our country who are standing up. I mean, this is obviously such a dark time, and I see such a bright future heralded by this movement responding to the crisis in the moment. And as much as I think the outrage is totally like necessary, I just want to raise up the props and the praise to our neighbors who are taking action, you know, and those of you who are reporting from the front line. Like, I have so much hope because of all of you, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I thank you for, I'm not doing that. Eugene is. I didn't mean to be presumptuous. Like, I try, you know,
You're a part of the movement,
these live
Katie.
streams are really, But and anything else you want to make sure people know about, events where people can find out more about your campaign? Yeah.
Check us out at shahidforchange.us. I saw some questions in the chat about what we're up to. Phone banking is a big part of it. We'd love to have you. We've trained 1,000 people on our phone banking tools. We have trainings every other day. Sign up at the website, check out the latest videos and press hits. And thank you, Katie, for having me on. Of
course. Yeah. And check out the interview that I did with Shahid for my show and the interview that I did with Matt Taibbi with Shahid for Useful Idiots. And we're going to try to get you back on Useful Idiots too.
I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Right on.
Thank you so much.
Great work, Eugene and Katie. Peace.
Thanks so much, man.
That was great. Thank you. Wow. I'm really happy that we got to talk to him.
Yeah. I mean, I've having known him for so long, it feels cosmic to have been back together.
Is there music in the background where you
are? Of me?
Yeah.
No, there's like a soft fan. Does it sound like music?
Does it sound like music to people? Maybe it's the fan, in which case it's fine. You know what song it sounds like? And I can't the way you walk, the way you talk, the way totally unrelated. I don't know why.
That's like, definitely not happening.
That's not like, I don't know why that came into my head. I think
is that like PTSD? Is that, I mean, what is
no. Who's that? Who sings that? That's like J-Lo.
It's like Ja Rule.
Ja Rule with J Rule.
Yes. Fun name.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
I know why that happened. I'll tell you guys in a second. So, Eugene, I want to bring Rania Khalek and Leslie Lee on. Then maybe we can all talk. Then we can set you free so that you're not spending your entire night here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Not that I'm not happy to be here. This is This is not prison duty for me.
Great. Well, let me let in your fellow inmates. Okay. Let's see. Hi. Hi, everyone. So I hope people are watching now. If you're watching this, you're watching this. Well, welcome everyone, and I'm really excited. Should we all do like a little tweet? Just another tweet. Let's do a tweet, right? Sure. This is a really DIY. This is just the beginning. Grassroots. While we do that, I'm just going to announce and biographize the people here. So we have Leslie Lee, who is a journalist, writer, cultural critic, and the co-host of the wonderful podcast Struggle Session.
Technically, I'm the host, not the co-host.
Oh, why are you the host?
I like to keep my co-host Jack down. Just I don't want to tag in too big, so I'm the host. He's the co-host.
Yeah. I got it. You're the host. Okay, yeah. You're like He's the sidekick. Yeah, it's Leslie Lee.
It's about elevating Black podcasters.
Right. It is. Yeah. It's titular reparations.
Yes,
if you will. And then Rania Khalek is a journalist and video show hostess and host. That's probably problematic. Whatever, host. No, I'm not. Definitely
unforgivable.
You're not a co-host. You're not a co-host. But I definitely would now know not to call you a co-host, even if you were a host of something with someone else. But you are.
Okay, I'm not offended. I can be a co-host. It's okay.
Well, you're a co-host with the Rania and Anya show. But
that's true. That's correct.
A utility player
for the Unauthorized Disclosure podcast.
Oh, and you are the co-host of the Unauthorized Disclosure podcast, right? With Kevin Gostola.
Yes.
And that's a great podcast, and you guys should listen to it. And Eugene, can you remind us what your show is called?
Breakthrough News.
Breakthrough News is the show name.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, is it the show name? I mean, there's several things, like if you want to go to patreon.com/breakthrough news that you'll see that are also, you can get as a patron that are branded under Breakthrough News. Primarily, we're putting out the show every week, Wednesday, 8 p.m., live streamed across Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. But we're also putting out individual segments. So, the news on Breakthrough is what we call it. But I mean, I think, the way branding works, we're all in one gumbo there.
Got it. Okay, good. So,
Katie, real quick, what's the link I'm supposed to be putting?
It's to the YouTube. It's to the YouTube.
Yeah, because I almost posted it to here.
And then people will come back.
We're gonna try to.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know where the YouTube is. I'm trying to.
It's in my tweet. Actually, you retweeted it. This thing, yeah.
I see. Okay, I got it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Carry on.
No. I mean, you're really interrupting my very strict flow here, like very rigid, organized.
So
like you're totally getting in the way of my Germanic structure. So Eugene was telling us about what was happening in Minneapolis, where he came back from, and you're now back in New York City. Eugene,
I am back in New
okay.
York City. Yes, I'm in the Bronx.
The Bronx, right? And Leslie and Rania, where are you guys coming from?
I'm in Northern Virginia right now. The only the major demonstration we had was initially was supposed to be a silent protest because they didn't want to cause too much trouble or drama here in Loudoun County. But eventually, it was a protest where they actually did, speak. But the final word ultimately was the most important thing we have to do is vote in November.
Leslie, did you organize this? Were you the person who said that?
No.
Don't be bashful. Don't be modest. Yeah.
Can I just say,
were you there, by the way? Were you there no? Okay. You must have been so upset. Sorry. Yeah.
You're right. No, I didn't know, Leslie. You're so close to me. I'm in Chantilly, Virginia.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I do live here. I'm sorry. This is like a side conversation I'll have with you later.
Just don't give out your exact address.
Yeah, let's hang out after the quarantine ends.
Yeah,
for sure.
The social distancing.
But no. That's funny. There was a protest in Loudoun County. So my parents live in an area in Northern Virginia called Burke, and it's like in the Fairfax area. It's pretty deep in the suburbs of DC. Like where Leslie is, and there was a protest there today. I grew up in Burke, Virginia. I don't think I've ever seen a protest in the 34 years that I've been alive take place in that area. So that was kind of interesting on the one hand. On the other hand, it was very like, we're white and we're really sorry kind of people. And that was sort of like the overall message. And then go vote. Yeah, that was like a similar.
Right.
But it was still interesting to see people in suburban America pretty far removed from this kind of stuff, like be in their own streets. That's new. I'm not sure if it's like a side effect of being in lockdown and not really having anything else to do, or if there's something like really unique about what's happening right now where people who don't typically do anything are doing something.
I had one. I'm at my parents' place on the Delaware River, and there was a thing. I should actually add some photos of Bodie, my family's dog. She was at the protest also. But excellent. That was I mean, it's an interesting question.
She renounce her white privilege.
What did she is white, so yeah, she specifically said, I don't want to lead, I want to support. And she has a black dog there, and she asked how she could be an ally.
I appreciate you facilitating that. That in and of itself is allyship.
I know, right? It's sorry, I just had to grab my charger. It's whatchamacallit? It's and it's there's interfaith and there's interspecies too. So we got all of it. We got all of it covered. I should grab some of those photos. Does anyone, by the way, have any photos or videos they want to share of anything? It's totally fine. We don't need to, but I just realized if
I'm sort of exhausted from looking at videos.
Yeah, we don't have to. Yeah.
Like
maybe I didn't know if you did, Eugene, but no pressure.
I mean, I did not make a selection. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, it's fine. I could show one of your videos. This program's really cool. You can do with that stuff.
That's funny. That's interesting you mentioned, Kay, because I've seen a lot of people saying like all the videos that are of extreme police violence that are being beamed into our brain right now. Like there was a new one just from like 35 minutes ago of like some old guy getting shoved on the ground and his head busted open by police. What people are saying is, well, my parents who watch the news all day, 24/7, MSNBC, that sort of thing, they don't see any of that. They're just seeing like a burnt out Target and like someone crying outside because it's so sad, or people like cleaning up, our poor like Chase Manhattan Bank that's been defaced with graffiti or something like that. So it's kind of like you're watching in real time, kind of like two different worlds that people live in. You have some people who see what's actually going on, which is all this violence from police against protesters, and then you have like all these people who think that like Antifa is burning down the country for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, I think what Leslie, I mean, you really hit it on the head. That really is speaking to me, having been there on the ground in Minneapolis, because, like at one point I said we were, the march got tear gassed on Saturday. So we're all getting tear gassed. And there's a lot of people in the street. I think one of our best interviews, we interviewed a woman there. It's pinned to my Twitter profile at Eugene Puryear. And, you know, people are super angry because this very peaceful protest is getting gassed. There's a lot of great things that are being said. So I just stopped one woman and said, would you mind coming on camera and just like saying how you feel? And she gave this really poignant thing. So MSNBC is there, and they've got like a camera person. They've got a million random people out there, including like 3 producers, and they're right there, and they're not capturing any of this. And I heard one of these producers say on the phone, I'm not going to say who I think I overheard him talking to because now I don't want to get libeled here, but it was someone high up in their structure saying there's not that much going on here. Like as that basically this was part for the course. Oh, just some protesters getting gassed. And of course that didn't, stop our cameraman from helping them, wash the gas off of their face with chemicals that they weren't prepared for. But it just felt like, damn, like y'all are right here and you have an immediate patch in to millions of people if you want. And there are like just a bunch of regular Minneapolis people, not cartel, operatives or whatever, some sort of international conspiracy. And like, you just are going to choose to just move on from that rather than try to capture that. And it really just felt that, you could just sort of see the sort of disinformation effect in real time. And the type of thing that I feel like mainstream journalists hate to admit ever exists, like there's ever any political decision ever in what they cover. But I just didn't know like how else to take it to hear some like producer on the phone saying there's not that much going on here when like that just was not the case. I don't know if not enough people were being killed or something, or if, it's not righteous enough. I don't know exactly what they're looking for,
maybe
but they missed a lot.
Maybe it wasn't looting.
Yeah. They also didn't get the people handing out, masks and hand sanitizer and water and food. And, honestly, some looted, quote unquote, looted goods. I can tell you this right now. I myself stopped at like a random table late at night, walking back from something. These people called us over our team. Hey, are you guys thirsty? Are you hungry? Do you need something? We're just like out here to help people. And we were like, where did you buy all this? And some of it they bought, some of it they were like, nah, it came from some of these looted stores. I can tell you this, I was in a shopping center that was allegedly looted, and all the stuff that was allegedly stolen, people had actually set up in almost like a free market that people could come by and look. And this is a country with 44 million people at any time experiencing hunger, 49 million people who are unemployed, like a $1,200 stimulus check. Like a lot of this is the stimulus check. When someone breaks into Payless, they aren't trying to steal Gucci's. They need some work shoes. It's that clear. But again, there was no MSNBC, no CNN to be found and telling that story on the ground.
That sounds like some free market fundamentalism.
Yeah.
Little callback. Thank you. I was sitting on that for a while. Actually, this program, which I always shout out, I don't know. I guess I think it's a great program. This thing we're using now, StreamYard. Sponsor me, guys, unless you're like in bed with some terrible corporation, but lets me play video easily. So can I play that video that you were talking about, Eugene? The one that
please.
To your profile? Okay, so I'm going to do a little share screen. Then I'm going to do a little Chrome tab. Mother of Three, that one, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Should I make this full screen?
Cool.
It's cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll make this full screen.
Quite a bit of defiance here from people, and I
don't know. That's not the one.
Oh, that's not the one. Okay, let me.
Yeah,
see.
I think it might be above that.
Hold on. Oh, it's
that one pinned to my personal profile.
That's
also a good video, but yeah,
right,
at Eugene Puryear.
Yeah, got it. I just this one, Mother of Three. Okay,
that's the one. Yep.
Great. Okay, let's do a little open thing.
I got uncles, I got cousins.
Okay, so any setup that you want, or should we just play this?
Well, the setup real quick, just what I just said. So like basically we're in this totally peaceful march. It had like just been gassed. A bunch of us are gassed. That's why my mask is down, because everyone's trying to, gas for air. We're blinking, our eyes are watering or whatever. And this woman was, who's from Minneapolis was very fired up. So I just asked her to share some of her feelings.
Okay.
What brought you out here tonight?
I got to stand for my people. I got 3 sons. I got uncles. I got cousins. I got brothers. And this shit is not right. We've been quiet for too fucking long. We've been quiet. We've been peaceful. Now it's time for revenge. Tear this bitch down. And I mean that from my heart. Tear it down. They doing people like this.
And what do you say to the governor who's saying people are coming from outside? It's drug cartels. It's other people.
No. It's tired people. It's people that's tired of this bullshit right here, taking advantage of us. This is our shit. Without us, we wouldn't even been out of this shit.
Let's go.
That's what we gonna try this bitch out.
Let's go.
Period.
Thank you. What brought you out here tonight?
Okay,
I
great.
gotta stand for my people. I got 3
Great.
sons. I got
and the tweet. Let's see, what did he written about that? He wrote,
that's really great.
right, and Mother 3 from Minneapolis. We've been quiet for too long. I mean this from my heart. Tear it down. And then the tweet that you wrote about this was, the person I interviewed here is the real voice of Minneapolis. Really belies the whole foreign influence BS floating around. Before anyone says anything, my mask is down because we'd just been gassed and I was catching my breath. So, yeah, that's a pretty amazing.
Well, that was going to be my first comment is, Eugene, we're wearing your mask incorrectly.
Yeah.
I was going to wag my finger. No, that was really emotional and really, like, I understand why that video went viral. And it's interesting because, like what you were saying, Eugene, watching CNN, because sometimes I hate myself, I do, and watching MSNBC, it's like they didn't do any interviews with people. I haven't seen many, maybe because they're scared of getting the virus, or like, but they've been pretty much keeping their distance from doing interviews with people. So you're not actually hearing what people on the ground are saying. You're just seeing kind of images from afar.
Yeah, and that's the type of person that MSNBC wouldn't put on anyway. Like,
Right.
they're not gonna put no real ass black ass people on TV, angry ass black ass people. That just is not a thing you see on MSNBC. They don't like. They don't like black people. They don't like black people. You never see black people on any of this stuff unless they are, like myself or Eugene, very, esteemed, professional,
Right.
educated. Like, put some real ass black people, hood ass black people on TV because they're the one going through it. That's why they're angry. That's why these people, like, the people do not understand the anger that you have to even the place you grow up in. Like, how can you burn your own neighborhood? Because your own neighborhood is just a bunch of, rundown businesses that like extort money from you, grocery stores with, spoiled food in it, like all this other shit. Like even the Target in Minneapolis. Now Target is kind of like a middle class bougie ass store, and the reason it was there is because it was like a lab that they use to like practice loss prevention techniques, which is anti-shoplifting techniques. So they were conducting like an experiment on the black community there by putting the Target there, and you can read like corporate statements from Target, like they're publicly available, saying like, that's why we have this Target. This is our testing lab. Well, I think the people who burned it down actually did them a big favor and gave them a lot of data for loss prevention, so they should actually tracking those people down in order to properly compensate
I'm
them
sure they're gonna
for
do
all
that,
the
right?
information that they handed out to them.
Wow. Yeah, you're allowed. I think that MSNBC is fine with black people being angry at Trump.
Yeah, that's
Like
about
that's
it.
the
Or at Bernie Sanders. You can be
Oh,
angry
Bernie
at Trump.
Sanders.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
you can have Bernie
Yeah,
Sanders.
you're right.
Especially
Well-
Bernie Sanders, actually.
Well, yeah, but you know what? At the end of the day, those guys are like the same. I don't know if you noticed that, but
Yeah, they're
like
both
the same.
authoritarian populists.
Yeah, exactly.
Attacking the media brutally.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love that. I love that argument. That is my favorite argument. Leslie, I'm just adding your tweet to the chat because someone asked about your.
Can I just say one real quick
Of
thing
course,
just
yeah.
about the wake of Bernie Sanders, just to
Yeah.
appreciate my co-panelists here. One thing that I do really appreciate about the Sanders movement is how much money was raised from working class people. And I think when we think about people say, oh, what's next? And like,
Yeah.
oh, the media is fucked up, which it is. There are so many great people doing amazing work, reporting, commentary, Leslie, Rania, Katie, many others who you know. And I think if we could put that, even a fraction of that support, we can, like, these media companies don't have to be all powerful forever. You know what I mean?
Right.
Obviously we can't just shut them down, but we can lift up our voices, I think, even higher. So I hate to make like appeals for money, but I guess I just feel like, so much money is changing hands over so much bullshit. And I want to encourage people to really just be intentional about supporting and institutionalizing people who are out here really, quote unquote, doing the work. I hate to use that phrase, but it's the shortest one I can use.
Oh, yeah, it's good. Yeah. No, that, and I was thinking not to undermine our own that call but I was thinking another thing people could do, because there are all these really wealthy people who are supportive, and I always make fun of people, but I realized that there is it's time to call in. You know what I mean? Sometimes we got to bring people in.
Yeah.
Like maybe Jane Fonda would fund a lot of like PPE kits for protesters or something. I know it's ridiculous, but I was thinking, actually watching your thing, Rania and Eugene, and you said something, I guess you were quoting the NAACP chair who made that point about how Trump has money to send in the National Guard, but not for masks. And it made me think that, and then there's a lot of talk about what are the demands, what are the asks, and of course this is decentralized. This is not an organization-led uprising. But I was thinking, maybe this sounds totally lame and like tame, but just getting people that equipment so they're that much safer to be out, protesting, and then it could help people feel like they were being supportive or something. The people who aren't going to come out.
Well, I support public health at all times.
Yeah. Since you're mentioning masks, one of my biggest hesitations, like I feel like a duty to be in like protests when they're being tear gassed and stuff. And like when cops are being crazy, I feel like I need to be there. And I have in the past, but one thing that's, been a huge obstacle for me personally has been like, I'm around my family a lot right now. And that includes my parents. And so I've been really scared to like go to DC, for example, to these protests because, I don't know if in a couple of weeks there's going to be a huge spike in the virus. I don't want to give it to my parents.
Right, of course.
And so I wonder what that media narrative is going to look like in a couple of weeks, if that is the case. I mean, to be fair to like people who have been going, it seems like they're all wearing masks, which is really great. But like also police are tear gassing people and they're kettling people and pepper spraying people. So people are like coughing all over the place and like rubbing their faces and stuff. So, and I don't know how good masks are at preventing, exposure when everyone's shouting and chanting. So my point is like, I wonder, if that CNN, MSNBC sort of, so far they've been sympathetic because they're putting it through a partisan lens of like anti-Trumpism. But I wonder if that will change if there's like a spike from this in a couple weeks.
I can guarantee like the first person that like coughs in Minneapolis in a week, there's going to be a news report on CNN. Was it worth all this? And besides all the looting, they've also spread COVID around. Now we're going to see a second spike, which I guarantee we would have seen like either way because we're in phase one, which right now where all like businesses are open, like the businesses in my neighborhood, they're like open. You just can walk in. People are out. 90% of the people aren't wearing masks anymore where I live. They're done with it. They're done with it.
They don't think it's there. They don't think it's a virus that touches them.
So people are already, and like even people like who are been following the rules are just like tired of it now too. So like they're slacking too. I've slacked a couple of times, but but there may be another spike, and they will absolutely, positively, 100%, I guarantee, blame it on the protesters who were out in the streets for ultimately what they'll say is no reason because the Democrats won't do anything about any of this. So they'll say that, they had all these big protesters and they accomplished nothing because the Democrats didn't do anything yet.
Yeah. How sympathetic do you guys think that they've been to, just going back to what you were saying earlier, it's related to what Leslie's saying, which is you're anticipating like a real blaming. I guess I don't think there hasn't been the language of like, Rodney King protest language. And it's funny. I couldn't believe Nancy Pelosi read George Herbert Walker Bush's comments on the Rodney King riots. And then I was about to say just now, it's like, there hasn't been the language about thugs. And I was like, oh, wait, that was Obama on the Freddie Gray protesters calling them thugs, right? So a bunch of questions just popped in my head at once, of course. But what do you think about the language, the discourse and the kind of framing of people who are rising up?
I think, it's been, yes, I don't think it's the worst it's ever been. Yeah. I will say like Friday night, I thought there was some good stuff on network news. Anderson Cooper brought on Cornel West, who I think in some ways made the best point I've heard almost anyone make when he was like, well, what about the looting and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, well, would you prefer that just no one cared? And that it was just like 12 people out holding signs and everyone else was like, who cares at all? And I thought like that kind of cut to the essence of it. Reverend William Barber from the Poor People's Campaign raising up a lot of issues of poverty. But then like, the very next morning you have the long Joy Ann Reid thing about how George Floyd anymore. It's about foreign actors trying to hijack the protest.
Oh,
And it just, and it almost
It
almost
was
felt
me,
like,
guys.
yeah.
I know.
It almost felt like, because it all emerged at like 1 a.m. when Tim Walz had this press conference on Saturday morning, because Friday obviously was like, it wasn't wild, but it was portrayed as wild. This Wells Fargo had been burned down. The post office had been burnt to the ground. And it was just like, so he comes on with the mayor and they start saying, well, we're getting this intelligence that it's like a national network of anarchists, or maybe drug cartels, or maybe white supremacists, or maybe, I don't know, some wild boogeyman. For some reason, they left out Al Qaeda or ISIS, which was surprising to me. They didn't get to that one. But
they're not in vogue anymore.
Yeah.
Al Qaeda's done.
Yeah.
Or
But it was interesting to see. It was really interesting to see, I think, especially MSNBC, but also CNN by about 11 o'clock the next day, or about 10 o'clock the next day, to be completely parroting this line when, like, the night before, I thought they had actually had some, like, good, relatively poignant programming. And I don't know exactly what the intersections are that make that happen, but I thought it was interesting to see just on the ground in Minneapolis how the framing seemed to shift overnight from, like, sort of understanding of righteous anger, even if I don't agree with all of it, to like, this maybe is a foreign plot and no one should do anything anymore because, they will be manipulated.
Yeah.
I think there's two things happening. I think on the one hand, the mainstream networks and these mainstream personalities are seeing this through the lens of like how they can make it against Trump, because they all hate Trump so much. So that's, I think, a big reason why they're so supportive in their rhetoric, in a way that they might not be under a Democratic president, or that they were not in Baltimore or Ferguson when Obama was president, because it's all about Trump. It's all about, oh my God, look how Trump is handling this. Oh my God, Trump wants to call on the military. Oh my God, Trump is crazy, which is all true. So there's that side of it. But then on the other hand, there's still warmongering assholes at the end of the day. So like everything becomes about Russia and China and Iran. And of course, it's like the US looks like a piece of crap country right now, because it is like
shithole country.
On fire.
Yeah.
It's a shithole. It's on fire right now. It like has the highest infection rate in the world. It has the highest death rate in the world for this virus. There's like people are burning shit down in like every city in the country. There's protests all over the place. The police are like beating people up on camera and tear gassing them. It looks insane here right now, And so in order to avoid having to really reflect, do an introspection on their role in this awful corrupt system, or why this country sucks so much, it's like, oh my God, look at China and Russia and how they're making us look bad with their media. It's like all you have to do is point a camera at America right now. You don't have to say anything. Like no commentary necessary. But like nobody wants to take responsibility for that. Anderson Cooper's not going to take responsibility for that. All of our people like Susan Rice aren't going to take responsibility for that. So they're going to make it about China and Russia, and about how to hate Trump more. And that's it, because they don't want to change the system. But
what are people in Lebanon that saying to you? That's what I want to know. You lived in.
Like,
what are they saying to you?
They're like, you were crazy to leave. Holy crap! Like you went to the worst place. Because I initially I live in Lebanon, but I left because I was like, I didn't, it was when this virus was just like every place was going nuts, and I was like, I don't know how bad it's gonna be. I might as well go be with my family.
Right.
I came back here, and then within like a month, everyone was like, "You're crazy! Everyone's dying in America." And now they're like, "You're crazy! America's on fire!" But they're also like kind of looking and laughing, because it's kind of like people in other countries, like because of what the U.S. does to other countries, they're like, "I hope you guys go to civil war. That's what you did to our country. I want to see it happen to you."
Yeah.
Some people say stuff like that.
It's a golden
rule. So like some people relish in our misery a little bit.
Right.
But they're also just like, what an awful country. I mean, like the U.S. looks just like completely horrendous right now.
I had on Margaret Kimberly the other day, and we were talking about the Russia narrative. And I have to say, I'm a little bit surprised. I'm always so naive, though. I'm always say to someone, I can't believe, and they're like, Katie, of course it's going to happen. So I should get over it already. But I'm a little surprised that people are still pushing the Russia. The Russians brought racism to the United States, or like Russia sowed discord in the United States. I think it's a little weird to be saying it now. Like I thought people had some level of shame and they wouldn't be pushing this in the midst of like so undeniably justified circumstances, so overtly justified. But no, they're still talking about it. I don't know if anyone has the clip of the Joyanne Reed thing. I don't have it, but I do have via friend of the show, Aaron Mate. I have the Susan Rice clip that I thought we could watch. Is that okay?
Yeah, this is it's like shocking.
Okay.
This clip is shocking.
All right, let's see.
I just
All right, from Aaron Mate. Okay, let me just 1 second. Let me see how that looks. Okay, great. All right, let me go back to that.
And also, I would bet, based on my experience, I'm not reading the intelligence today or these days, but based on my experience, this is right out of the Russian playbook as well. And they're probably also, I would bet, based on my experience, I'm not reading the intelligence today or these days, but based on my experience, this is right out of the Russian playbook as well.
So you guys, could you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
She goes further. She actually says the Russians are funding it.
Yeah, where is that one?
I can find it for you if you want.
You sent me something, Rania,
No,
right?
no, I sent you a different one. This is Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor. He goes even. He blames a lot of other countries.
Let's see. Where's the full Susan Rice one?
I'll find it. Great.
Great.
But if you want, you can play the Robert O'Brien one I sent you.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's the level of thinking that people who decide whether we go to war or not are on. Like this is a peek into their minds, all this security apparatus that we're told to listen to and respect and believe everything all the intelligence that they leak to the New York Times or whatever. Like that's their response to this. They see a bunch of, regular people in the streets and they think like Russia organized this. Well, hell, if Russia is this good and this powerful, like the Democrats should like hire like Putin as like a consultant instead of paying all those like pod save like weirdos to like consult for them. They are all those people. They should be paying like Russians. Like every single consultant in the United States should be a Russian if they're this good.
At the end of the day, what's really funny about all of these claims is like Russians, Iranians, the Chinese, they don't know how to sway Americans. Like they don't. It's like Americans also don't know how to sway them. It's like American propaganda in their countries, or even American media outlets in their countries are not good at swaying their populations. They're just not, and they suck even more at it trying to do it in America. Like,
and Rania knows because that's what she gets paid to do.
But have you watched RT America? Like,
it's not the great.
It's like at the end of the day too. Like let's just say like ultra cynical. This is what you really believe. Well, then like, wouldn't your number one goal be to end the underlying problem that that caused this whole thing? Like, if they're exploiting quote unquote like racial strife in America, well, why not eliminate like quote unquote racial strife? I mean, to me, it just shows the disingenuousness of the discourse that it never comes back to like, well, what is actually behind people being angry about XYZ problem?
Well, Katie, if you say I sent you the other Susan Rice clip, and I think you should really play it because Wolf Blitzer makes a point.
But this is only 13 seconds long. That's the right one?
No, I sent you another one. It's definitely longer. It's like a minute long.
I know there's a longer one, but did you send that one to me?
Yeah, I just texted it to you. But the reason you should play it though is because Wolf Blitzer.
Don't give it away. Don't give it away. 1 second.
I sent you 2 clips.
It's like we're watching a movie right now.
I know. This is like we should, but that's their. Okay, they're both from Aaron Mate, but they're both from Aaron Mate. Hold on.
No, one is for the one I sent you. One from Aaron Mate.
Hold on.
Well, Aaron Mate posts many very useful videos for the archive.
Okay, I just played the one you sent, and hold on. Did you hear it when I was playing it? Hold on. Oh no, because I didn't share my screen. Hold on 1 second. Oh my God. Yeah. This is why you have to donate to everyone, all of our Patreons. Because I need a,
you need a tech.
I need the person. I'm like, where's that clip? And they're like, boom. And then they just, and my back, I'm like, my back's going out. That's what I should do. Every show I should have a segment where I'm like, oi, my back. I just do like instead of like a pitching, like what's it called, a telethon thingy, I'll just spend 5 minutes instead of being like, you'll get a tote bag, you'll get this, you'll get that. I'll be like, my back is killing me. You have no idea how much. Really painful. You see? Okay. I didn't get
Are you fundraising for your prescriptions for a better care? I don't know.
I forgot because I'm bent forward to try to, control the thingy bink. Okay, 1 second. Sorry. All right. I'm gonna play this one you sent me, which I put the volume all the way up on, but it's not. Hold on. Let me do this thing. Let me do a screen share. Okay.
I'll tell you if it's the right one.
It's because it's another Aaron Mate,
right?
Susan Rice,
but it's like better quality than the one you played.
Wait, there are two of them. Yeah, you're right. Hold on. Let me just do this again. Okay.
I really don't.
Of course, of course, Aaron has like 55 clips of the same. Of course, yes. This is his lane. If there's anyone who's going to have like multiple clips of Susan Rice saying the same thing with different time codes, it'll be him. And I say that with nothing but great admiration. Hold on a second. Okay,
I feel like I should tell you when to start it. Like, what?
It's only 13 seconds though. 1 second.
No, I sent you one that's 1 minute and 17 seconds.
Shouldn't you resend it just to be like,
yeah,
this
you're right.
One?
This is why Eugene is such a fine supporter, because he gets
top of the inbox.
He gets to the root of the problem.
I texted the group message.
Send it wherever, yeah. But I
texted you. Here,
hold on.
This one. It's like in a thread. It's in a thread. Maybe you're reading the wrong one in the thread. But
what thread what thread are you texting?
Look at this Discord. The Russians are sewing right now. Okay, I found it. This is, you see, Rania. I'm not going to say anything. All right. Okay.
Well, I will say one thing, just by the way, as a native of Charlottesville, the fact that I got to the root of the problem and Nova is messing around with all these bureaucratic, unable to communicate, is a sign about the true nature.
Eugene, back up, man. Back up.
I don't claim Nova. I'm a Louisiana boy.
I don't claim Nova either. I have no special attachment at all. Like, I don't care. But it's when you start attacking me like that, I feel like
No, I know you have to. I appreciate that. Shout out Charles Flies to anybody who's watching.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. Sorry.
We're talking about the rivalry in Virginia.
A place outside of New York.
Shut up.
You guys think there's going to be a civil war over the Confederate monument coming down in Richmond?
Well, I'll tell you this, having grown up in like true Confederate country, I was in the Stonewall Jackson Council of the Boy Scouts. I believe that the cultural role of Monument Avenue for these lost cause people, I don't know if there's going to be a civil war, but I think to take down a statue in Charlottesville and Alexandria is one thing, but like the cultural historical value, I think far outside of Virginia, it could be a major inflection point to bring those statues down. It's so shameful, the way that Richmond, which is a great city, it's so shameful, a majority black city, or, until recently, that these massive, it's hard for people to understand who haven't been there, but it's sort of like if you've been to Berlin and there's all those huge roundabouts, like when you sort of start to go through the city, and it's like that, except in the middle of the roundabout, instead of like some obelisk or whatever the hell they have in Berlin, and some of them, they're just these giant Jeb Stuart, Robert E. Lee. At the end, they put Arthur Ashe, which I can remember as a young person, that was a huge fight. Like, they did not want to put Arthur Ashe on Monument Avenue because the attitude was, we cannot have a black person on here. But yeah, I think it could be, it'll be tremendously powerful and tremendously cathartic, I think, for black people in the state of Virginia, for it to happen. I think, I don't want to give too much credit to the Democrats of Virginia, but I think that was a major change they made to give the localities back the power, because it's unbelievable, like these majority black areas that have to deal with these ridiculous Confederate statues.
Yeah, it's way worse than having Lee Jackson Memorial Highway.
Yeah,
it's way worse. We're like having like Robert E. Lee High School.
I know all black middle school and all black middle school in Hampton. That is Jefferson Davis Middle School.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Oh my God. Yeah, we have a Jefferson Davis Highway in Northern Virginia, but it's like white people live there.
Yeah.
I can't imagine if it was like black people had to. That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
All right, I got Susan. Ready?
You got
Yeah.
Susan.
Suddenly, Desperately Seeking Susan. You guys remember that movie? Okay.
No.
Let's see.
I do,
You
yes.
do, right? How do I make this so we're all watching it? Okay, great. Here we go.
I think it's the same one you played before.
No, it's longer.
totally
Only one way to find out.
Playbook as well.
No, it's
But we
longer.
the
can't
same
allow
one as
Hold
before.
on. No,
the
it's
foreign
not.
actors-
It's just a minute long, over a minute long.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
the Russian playbook as well. But we can't allow the extremists, the foreign actors, to distract from the real problems we have in this country that are long-standing, centuries old, and need to be addressed responsibly by new leadership.
You're absolutely right on the foreign interference, because we know for decades the Russians, when it was the Soviet Union, the communists, they've often tried to embarrass the United States by promoting the racial divide in our country. But what you're suggesting, Ambassador, is that they're still trying to do that? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, we see it all the time. We've seen it for years and frankly every day on social media, where they take any divisive, painful issue, whether it's immigration, whether it's gay rights, whether it's gun violence, and always racism, and they play on both sides. Their aim is not simply to embarrass the United States, Wolf. Their aim is to divide us, to cause us to come into combat with each other, to disintegrate from within. And I would not be surprised to learn that they have fomented some of these extremists on both sides using social media. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that they're funding it in some way, shape, or form.
I guess the Russians are funding the police department.
Yeah. It was Putin who told the officer to kneel on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes.
Yeah,
That was
that was so upsetting. While you were playing it, Katie, I actually tried to fast forward it. Without realizing
that I was controlling it.
You were
Yeah.
controlling it. Like, they were in power, right? Like, the Obama administration was in power for 8 years. I believe Ta-Nehisi Coates has a book called "We Were 8 Years in Power" about her and Barack Obama, and the fact that they were in power for 8 years. These issues were front and center during their administration. It's not like it flew under the radar. We had Black Lives Matter started under their administration. His friend, his bougie ass friend, got arrested on his front porch by some goofy ass white cop, and he invited the goofy ass white cop to the White House for a beer. Like, you had your time to do
Henry
this.
Louis Gates.
Yeah, Henry Louis Gates.
Yeah, the historian. Yeah.
So you had all the time in the world to do what you wanted to do to tackle this problem, and now you say to us, 4 years after your administration's whatever accomplishment it had have been erased by the far right. Now you say, oh, what we need is a new leadership to tackle this. You were supposed to be the new leadership who was supposed to tackle this.
I mean, it's just like, I know this is a mixed audience, so many people, you maybe shouldn't repeat this, but I'm just going to say it. This is why so many slave revolts did not succeed, because there's always some who just, for whatever reason, as Malcolm X famously said, when the master gets sick, you say, we sick, boss. It just makes no sense at all what these people are even talking about in terms of Russia. I mean, it's such a slap in the face to Black people in America, as if we need some sort of outside power to tell us that we're being brutally oppressed and murdered in the street like we're less than human beings, and that in every single social indicator in society we are doing worse off, and that it's basically been that way since the very beginning. No one has to stir that up. No one can embarrass the United States, or the United States is embarrassing itself over that. People are just reporting the factual things that are happening to the Black community in America. And it just shows the truly just bootlicking nature of these people. I mean, to me, it's disgusting, because I know that they know that they're wrong. There's no way that anyone can say, oh, well, it's good faith that this is, no. Right. You were Black in America and you were 50, 60 some years old. You know what it is. You know exactly what's going on, but you want to serve the geopolitical agenda that fits your role. Someone said in the chat, Black faces in high places. And ultimately, that is the false bill of goods that has been sold to Black America as liberation. But I think now, when we're seeing the reality, in the streets of Minneapolis and in the streets of Atlanta and in the other places where, you know, as Leslie said before, the people in the hood who don't get heard are making themselves heard, whether you like it or not. Maybe in the language of a 52-inch TV walking out of Target, maybe in the language of a righteous political protest, but it's all part of, you know, the overall response. I don't know, I'm rambling now, but it's like crazy to see like Susan Rice up here.
Yeah.
I also wonder how much of that is projection, right? Like Susan Rice was a UN. I think she was a UN ambassador at one point. She was also a high-level national security advisor to Barack Obama. And a high level
to Clinton as well. Played a major role then.
So that's her role, right? Is being the national security state. And so she played a huge role in Libya. In pushing for the overthrow of the Gaddafi regime in Libya, which led to a bunch of extremist groups taking over and open air slave markets.
Right.
Ironically,
open air, though.
Yeah, were any targets burned in Libya?
Targets were burned. Yeah, the leader of Libya was sodomized on camera and killed undercover by rebels who did it under the cover of U.S. airstrikes.
And NATO airstrikes, right?
And of NATO airstrikes, to be correct. NATO
US,
airstrikes. Let's say Rio, the U.S.
Yeah.
NATO is the U.S.
Yeah.
But the point of me saying
and
that
then was
is
tweeted out by Marco Rubio as an inspirational.
Exactly. But like there's like exactly. There's like this level of hypocrisy here where like you intervene in so many countries and you're sitting here talking about other countries intervening when they're not actually doing anything. But on the other hand, you know, maybe these people are really that delusional. Like they know the US does this to other countries. So maybe they just assume other countries do it to us. Like maybe they
right. I mean, I see what you mean by the projection, right?
It's projection. I mean, I'm sure she knows better too, but also I think there probably is a level of projection there. Like the US, whenever there's protests in Iran, the US is like jumping in there, getting all their people like involved and making it worse and making it more chaotic. And spreading crazy propaganda on protesters in other countries to burn things. Like they do it in Venezuela, they do it in Hong Kong, they do it, you know, in Iran, like they do it in all these countries. So it's like, maybe, you know, I don't know, maybe that's where their mind goes because that's what they do. Like that's what Susan Rice helps to do.
Yeah, I'm always curious, like often I wonder, disingenuous or dumb? Or deluded. Like those are the options, right? You can really not get it, or you can be disingenuous, or you can be like deluding yourself, which maybe is the case for her. But I think it's just your read, at least, right, Eugene, is that she's just totally cynical, knows this is bullshit, and is weaponizing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a tendency to give the benefit of the doubt to like authority figures, you know, and I don't think it's anyone's fault. I think it's just like the way you're conditioned to treat people. But I kind of feel like these things are so much of what we're saying is just so obvious that like, how can you really not be sort of just initially just justifying for yourself these terrible things? It just seems to me, it just seems too ridiculous almost to say like, anything else. I don't know. To not insult these people in intelligence. If I'm going to treat them as intelligent actors, I have to some degree assume that they're also pernicious actors.
Could be a little bit of both. I mean, I think that people do delude themselves when they know they're being disingenuous. Right. Like they convince themselves. But who knows, at the end of the day, like it could just be evil bullshit where it's like she goes home at night and she's like, I did my job today, I lied. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I meant. Like, I really thought it wouldn't, like, Max Blumenthal did that funny cold open for his show. Was it a video or just audio when he did a thing? It was like,
I think it was just audio.
It was really funny. A PBS thing about how Putin invented, what was it? It was like before Putin, you know, it was a very intersectional system called where
like America was a woke utopia where blacks and whites lived together in racial woke harmony, and then Putin came along. It was pretty fun. He did like a really that's essentially what Wolf Blitzer was saying, right? He was saying that as long as this has been going on,
it's also such obvious scapegoating because, of course, the Soviet Union took advantage of racism to embarrass the United States. Of course, that was an ideological warfare, PR move. But like, imagine being like, well, the communists really want to embarrass us, so we're going to keep Jim Crow. I mean,
Yeah, I
somebody
mean,
did say that, but you don't say that out loud.
The Soviet Union did more for black people in America than a good number of like the highly lionized
Right.
politicians. I mean, you look at these people, these Dixiecrats, some of whom stayed in forever, like Strom Thurmond, Jesse Helms, James Eastland. I was once at the christening, don't ask me why, of the USS John Stennis, this like just segregationist Mississippi Republican who got elected when the Republicans took over the white supremacist vote. I mean, we have all these like lionizing things for these people who wanted to have a fascist. I mean, look, my father was deeply involved in the civil rights movement, and I'll never forget a story that he told me when he first started working at Tuskegee University in 1960. And, Tuskegee had sort of carved out a little bit of independence by having, essentially a paternalistic relationship with the white power structure. And, some of these professors were pretty well paid. And he told me how many of them would either not ever drive their cars off campus or would wear chauffeur caps when they did, because to be driving a nice car, they would probably be lynched. These are professional people, and like the politicians who thought that was cool, and not to just like lionize professionals, but you just think like the most upstanding quote unquote figures by all the sort of elements of identity politics, being treated in such a subhuman way. And like people who were like cool with that were like, oh, they were great people, like it was all fine, like John F. Kennedy, like whatever. I don't want to like rip JFK, but like, what is his big concern about moving on civil rights? Well, are we going to lose the South? Are we going to lose the Dixiecrat? I would rather support fascism in the South than potentially lose the election. And I think we sort of lose sight of that. And like whatever you want to say about the Soviet Union, they were a force that was allowing, in the 1930s, there was no other institution in America where a black person could be accepted as a full human being, as a leader of white people, and as someone who could be an intellectual leader in society other than the Communist Party. No other institution, and I'll debate anyone on that any day of the week, that no other institution in the 1930s. That's why the Popular Front existed. That's why the National Negro Congress existed. And this whole idea that this was some Russian manipulation, well, it was also salvation. Like read Angelo Herndon's autobiography when he talks about how he heard about the communists when they sent a leaflet about, the Hunger March and the conversation in his communities in Alabama. They thought, he said, we thought that this was the new Civil War, and that Stalin was the new Lincoln, and that the communists were going to come in here and like arm us so we could free ourselves. And we were excited by that. And I think like that's what gets left out. I know the New York Times did their little 2017 thing where they had a couple little token articles and shit about that. But the reality of it is it's just unmatched, and it's been totally missed. But it's just, I can't stand this Wolf Blitzer shit, because, what would you have been doing then? You would have, get out of here.
Blitzer would have been on TV justifying segregation. Yeah, or that, or working for AIPAC, whatever the predecessor to AIPAC.
But I guess, Eugene, I totally agree with you, and I'm one of the like how many people in the world who grew up hearing, I mean, not from black relatives because I don't have them, but I mean, I'm one of the handful of people with whom, who's like, yes, totally. But what I'm more surprised about is like, not that Wolf Blitzer doesn't realize the contributions of the Soviet Union to black liberation, but that he would say something like that as if it, like, even if that's true, let's just say, even if that's true, is the takeaway that like we don't need to work on impunity for police murdering black people, black men especially, like just like you wouldn't now say the takeaway was like, I mean, or are they willing to say like, you know what, we shouldn't have done all the we shouldn't have gotten rid of Jim Crow because we just gave in to Russian Soviet meddling. Like the idea that is, first of all, not to quote Chris Hayes, who talks about the agency of the Russian propaganda, but like, what? Who cares? Like, aren't you an anti-race? I mean, they're not, but aren't you an anti-racist patriot, American patriot, land of the free, founding fathers, all that stuff? Like, aren't you that? Aren't you upset by this? And I guess you're right. Like, why am I giving them all this credit? They're full of shit and assholes. But I guess I'm just amazed by the optics of it.
I mean,
well,
what
they're
also... Oh, you can go ahead, Rania.
No. I was just going to make a point. That's not important.
Let's go, Leslie.
Yeah, I would just say, like, their main point is, like, you think that, if the Russians are exploiting, these racial tensions, well, shouldn't we fix the racial tensions instead of blaming the Russians?
Right.
Their ultimate goal is to, like, sweep all this under the rug and and do as little as possible to get the Negroes,
Yes.
back in the house. That's basically what they're trying to do. So like they're not like anti-racist in any real sense. They're anti having to deal with racism and talk about racism. If someone is so racist that they have to talk about and deal with, I mean, that's why they don't like Trump, because he makes them
Right.
have to actually talk about all this stuff. So their
Mhm.
ultimate goal is not to get rid of racism, but to get rid of like people being mad and agitated about racism. Because if we start really pulling on this thread in a way that's like serious, then the whole like thing comes down. It's like,
Right.
oh, then you're talking about like capitalism
Right.
too, if you're talking about anti-racism. And they don't want it to ever like get that far. They want like a nice, commission or like some kind of summit, and then for us to go about our business.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes, and I don't mean that. I don't think they're actually committed to that. I just mean that I thought the lip service would be towards that more than the Russians are coming. But again, I'm giving them way too much credit. I want to ask you guys about, and if anyone wants to go, feel free, because I don't want to hold anyone hostage in here. But I want to ask you about your views on the election, because I have to admit, and I told you this, Leslie, the other day, but that I have a lot of friends who either said the elections don't matter, who said that they actually secretly hoped Trump would win, not because they like him, but because they think that the Democrats, it's the only way they're going to learn how to actually, respond to the people's needs. And this one friend of mine who said that was like, but you know what, with this stuff with Trump, I'm not in that camp anymore. Like, I hate Biden, but it really does matter. This is something where we see a difference in the responses. So I want to know how you guys respond to that. And also, I don't know where you were in terms of, well, I know where you were, Leslie, but in terms of voting for Biden before. Yeah. Does that make sense? My question? Kind of rambling.
I'll say, like, I don't think the rest of the world, and when I say the rest of the world, I think I'm talking about the countries that are under like America's boot, can handle another 4 years of Trump. I felt that way before all this happened. I don't think Venezuela can survive it. I don't think Iran can survive it. It's really bad. Like, it's really bad. Internally in this country, I think Trump has been really devastating for the left. I think the country's actually become more right-wing. I think that everybody who isn't right-wing has been swept up in like the hashtag resistance kind of liberalism that is completely like useless and has no substance to it. And I think we've actually like regressed. Like, progressives have regressed, which I don't think a lot of people agree with, but I think that's the case completely. And I think it's one of the reasons Bernie Sanders lost the primary is because the Democratic electorate is actually more right-wing now. So I don't want Trump to be president. I do think there's a difference. I understand people who don't feel that way. I could have never imagined myself saying that in 2016. But yeah, I want Trump out. Like, yeah. I think the left will have a better chance of actually like doing something that changes things. If not, I mean, not talking about a Democrat being in office, just not a circus clown who takes up all the attention, with every single thing he tweets, where you can't have a conversation about anything.
Uh-oh, I'm sensing some beef. Let's see. Who wants to go next?
I'll say, like, I mean, the reason I supported Bernie, I mean, I don't really, not to, put you down, Kate, but I don't think the question is really legitimate at this point anymore. Because the reason I supported Bernie Sanders is because I thought Joe Biden was going to lose. And, like, I think Bernie Sanders was the only one who's going to beat Trump. So it's kind of like, oh, do you feel differently about the election? Like, no, not really. Like, I don't think COVID has hurt Trump to a significant degree. I don't think these protests, I mean, it certainly does look bad for Trump now, but we got 9 months of, his networks, and not just talk about Fox News, but CNN. All he has to do is, drop a drone strike on the general in Iran, and then he gets, as much positive coverage as he wants. We are so far away from the election, like, people might not even mention what's going on now when the
Right.
election comes on. Like that's how fast the news moves and how fast our lives move now. So like the question, like, well, do I want to? I think Biden's going to lose. like so it's kind of
Yeah, I
like
think there's a good chance he'll lose. I
Yeah.
think there's a very good chance he'll
Just
lose.
to
even with all this.
clarify what I was saying, which wasn't clear because I was basing it on an anecdote where the person who said this to me, I'm not even quoting him. So, but I didn't mean now Trump is done. So
No. I know. I was joking about the question.
Okay.
It was because I'm gonna be asked that question by people who are
Oh,
going
yeah,
to be like
of
angry
course.
about it. I'm like,
Oh, no, right.
It's too late for them, not for you, but for them. Like it's too late.
Oh, yeah, no, I
ship,
totally understand.
as far as I
Yeah.
care, like that ship like sailed a few months ago. We were telling you that
Right.
Biden's not gonna win, and I
Yeah.
don't think he's gonna win.
Oh no, I say this as someone who does not have a moral I say this as this is a safe space for the opinion that I expressed, both sides of it. The opinion that my friend first said, which is that he secretly hopes Trump wins because he thinks that it's, or not even, I mean, there's people, the range is like, I hope Trump wins, to it doesn't make a difference, to secretly saying I hope Trump wins, to teach the Dems a lesson.
But I feel like that's part of the problem in a way, Katie, is I feel like the question is often posed to us in this Faustian bargain way that I don't think is really correct. Like, to me, like what you think about the election is kind of dependent on like who you think you are, what role you want to play, and like what your end goal is. Like, I think the biggest problem for the quote unquote left is that people allow the Democratic consultants to define what the base is. I mean, every American president only has between about 25 and 32% of the adult population that supports them. We know that, huge numbers of people, I mean, the Black community, anywhere from 40 to 90% of people are not voting, and some of the 80% of these people, depending on the election and depending on the level. I mean, there's a huge number of like disaffected people who are we know from polling, but we also know from common sense, are overwhelmingly working class, poor people, disproportionately working class and poor people, disproportionately people of color, disproportionately young people, all the people who are shamed for not voting. We know this.
Yeah.
But like that's the base of people who I believe are the most disaffected because the system delivers the worst results. So to swing that back around to the election, like the real issue here is the lesser of two evils has in no way, shape, or form like arrested the move to the right. I mean, like you look at Venezuela, it was Obama labeling Venezuela a national security threat that actually laid the sort of foundation for Trump to be able to move the way he wanted to move. It's Bill Clinton in 1994 who made the border an issue for the first time really it had ever been, and where they established a new policy where their goal, this is their actual goal, written in black and white, was to drive people using car chases into the most dangerous areas of the desert in hopes more people would die so that less people would come to the United States. And, that was sort of the beginning of the modern conversation on border security. So I think to say that there's no difference between the two parties is like completely flip and completely pedantic and is false. But I think like when we look at the differences, are they substantive and are they enough to sort of turn us around? And in my view, I hate to use military strategy, but there's really only one way to like break a retreat. How a retreat's broken is for someone to turn and make a stand. That's why they say the worst thing you can do when the enemy starts running away is pursue them too far, because you become overextended. And if someone says, hey, we're going to put up a fight, it can actually turn a retreat into a rout of you. And I think that ultimately somebody somewhere has to stand up at some point and say, like, to the people who are completely disaffected, who feel like even Bernie Sanders, who brought so many positive things, is now like my friend Joe Biden and all these other things. It makes people feel like, well, what the fuck? Like we need real fundamental change. Someone needs to stand up and create a rally point. That's why I'm voting for Gloria LaRiva and Leonard Peltier. Some people may say I'm crazy, voting for a third party, voting for communist or whatever, but someone has to plant a flag and say, like, this is the point we rally around, and like this is when we turn back. And if you feel like fuck this system and it's not doing anything for me, like you're definitely right. And there are a lot of people who also don't want to sell out. And like if we just kind of come together, we can change the political calculus. But like until you kind of face some of those tough, like the final thing I'll say about this, everyone always says Frederick Douglass supported Abraham Lincoln, which is actually false. Frederick Douglass initially supported the Liberty Party. Then he moved to support Lincoln because he thought, okay, Lincoln might be doing something. But then he switched back because he was like, he's not really doing that much. But like obviously Frederick Douglass was one of the strongest supporters of Lincoln and Lincoln's program as presidency when he decided to eliminate slavery. But he recognized that like to maintain that voice of abolitionist like uncompromising, unbending reality was actually crucial to helping the Lincolns of the world realize the only way to succeed in their goal of the Union was to ultimately address the question of abolition. So I think we have to have that sort of iron core, true north, magnetic north kind of thing to get people turned back around. Even though, I mean, will we win this year? Obviously not, honestly, in a way. But at a certain point, it's like strategically, how are we going to move? And are we just going to keep like letting it shift further and further to the right and have people become more and more cynical and more nihilistic that nothing can change? Or, I don't know, try to change the calculus?
I mean, when you put it that way, like you make a good argument. I'm not going to argue with that. I think you're right, but I understand your viewpoint, and I understand also the viewpoint of people who are like, I just can't take Trump anymore. Like, I understand it all. I'm also pretty pissed at Bernie Sanders. Like,
yeah, what are we going to do?
I've become increasingly angry at him.
What are we going to do about this thing? First of all, where is he? The problem is Biden is such a weak candidate that if he opens his mouth and says anything rallying, people are going to like know that they need to drop Biden.
Who would it know? I don't. Sorry,
the shoot them in the leg video was already a big one, where this was Biden's idea, and this is also the idea that every 6-year-old who watches too many like action movies thinks,
including
you can just shoot someone in the leg, and then that stops them, and it doesn't kill them. I remember.
Also, Biden said an unarmed person who comes at you with a knife. I just want to. Include that. An unarmed person who comes at you with a knife. Anyways, continue.
Yeah, but the femoral artery is in your leg. It can kill you. And even and like I'll even like say think about the cops. The cops would not be, for this, because if you're pulling out a gun to shoot someone, you should be shooting to like kill them, because you're at that point where like your life's threatened, etc., etc. You shouldn't be pulling out your gun. You shouldn't have that gun. But if you're what the cops are going to say is like the point of pulling out a gun is to kill someone,
right?
And you don't try to shoot them in the leg. You shoot for like the mass, like in the torso. So no cop union. No, not even just like that's not even me like being negative about the police. Like, it doesn't make sense. Anybody who like knows anything about guns or fire, this guy has been in Congress for decades. He doesn't know that if you shoot, you are supposed to be shooting to kill. You don't play a gun is not a toy. A gun is a thing designed to do one thing.
It's not to just stop someone running.
Yes.
Right? Because that's it is ironic. It's ironic because it's actually more dangerous. It's so funny that you said that, because I thought the same. It's like, when I was a little kid, I remember turning to my parents and being like, why can't they just shoot in the foot? Why not the foot? Which, first of all, Biden, why don't you suggest the foot if you're going to be smart? Like, if you want to create this program, do the foot. But I want to make sure people, that's what, we should be like, the Dems should have shooting you in the heart, not the foot. I mean, sorry, no, shooting you in the heart, no. Shooting you in the leg, not the heart. Biden 2020, right? And then, but we need to move him to the left, and where we'll move him is to shoot him in the foot. But I just want to make sure people saw this video of this. I assume that they did, but
I have to go in a couple minutes. Just
I see you yawning.
Also, I don't mean to.
You're triggered.
So early.
You're triggered by Trump.
I yawn when I'm triggered. I yawn.
All right, we'll send you out of here. 1 second. Let me just show this. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And teaching a cop, and the idea that instead of standing there and teaching a cop when there's an unarmed person coming at him with a knife or something to shoot him in the leg instead of in the heart is a very different thing. There's a lot of different things that can change.
He was in Congress. He was he was on committees that are supposed to be about this. That's so that's like someone who watches Law and Order knows more about this issue than the guy who wrote the crime bill. Like that's just absurd.
He's also got some serious dementia and can't even get it right. He can't even say his crazy line right. Like, did you guys hear that? He was like, an unarmed person coming at you with a knife. an unarmed person coming at you with a knife.
He's definitely struggling, and I think people underestimate the power of the Trump social media team to exploit that. I was actually rewatching some of those like sick Hillary Clinton videos the other day, and I was like, damn, this is actually like more effective. And I'll be honest with you, I knew some people, sort of like not that political people, who were definitely affected by that in 2016. And I was like, yo, I mean, whatever I will say about Hillary, like most of those videos are like definitely selectively edited. They're like, I don't know, she does look sick though. And it just, I think Biden has given so much like legitimate fodder, like with, I mean, if you aren't questioning it, I don't know what you're questioning. I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to diagnose anyone, but like ultimately at the end of the day, like if this was your relative, I think you would be concerned. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Even if everything ended up being okay, you would at least say, amongst other family members, maybe we should like say something and just like make sure everything's okay. Yeah. But here it's just like, no, everything's fine despite all appearances. And I think it honestly shows to some degree, and I could be wrong about this, but I think I'm right, and I think you guys might agree with me. The Democratic establishment was so desperate to beat Bernie Sanders and prevent even the smallest amount of reform that they just seized on the first object that they thought could actually stop him. And because of a lot of complicated things with, different elements of the electorate, but like, they don't even really care. Like, I don't even think people are like, why would they do this? I think honestly, they're thinking, it reminds me of a guy I saw on Morning Joe. And it's like one of these random people they have on there who's like one of these, former Republicans, Trump is a fascist kind of guy. Oh, and he said, and he says on there,
Rick Wilson or Stephen Schmidt, maybe
one of them, and not Stephen Schmidt. I would have remembered him. And they were just like, well, would you vote for Bernie Sanders over Trump? Because you say Trump is so bad. And he's like, well, definitely not. And then he says, I mean, Joe, listen, these people, what the hell is that? Want to turn the United States into Denmark. All due respect to Denmark, but that's not who we are. And I just thought, what is the mentality of someone who thinks like it would be better to have 4 more years of Trump as opposed to Denmark? Like, I mean, like that's an unbelievable statement in so many ways, especially from someone who's like, oh, Trump is a fascist. And you just think like, okay, so these people don't care. They go scales of justice, like, okay, actual justice and equality for Americans, or like keeping the status quo going that's, making us all rich. Fuck it, let's put this old guy up there and whatever happens, happens. But at least we won't have Bernie Sanders and, attacking our bread and butter.
It's really incredible. Yeah. And I just want to show really quickly.
Guys, I have to.
Yeah, okay, Rania.
But it was so good to be on with you guys. Have a great night.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure.
I'll see you tomorrow. I'll message you in the morning. Right, it was really good seeing you, Leslie and Eugene. Bye, guys.
Good seeing you too.
Bye. Anti-Semite. Just kidding. I joke with her about that stuff. It's okay. I'm anti-Jews or something. I just want to share these clips, just tweets, because I think this is important also. The fact that, when Biden said that about the leg, what's really interesting about that is that this is also something that's been said. 1 second. Sorry about this. No, not that. Sorry about this. How do I make this thing? Karl Marx Jr. Sorry. This is 1 second. Stop. And then share. I'll cut this part out. Okay. You guys see this? I knew that shoot them in the leg phrase sounded familiar. Looks like Biden is plagiarizing again. So this is the Biden quote. There are a lot of different things that can change about police training. One example, if cops rushed by an unarmed person, they could shoot them in the leg instead of the heart. Very different thing. And then, of course, Trump on migrants, shoot them in the leg. Where I remember hearing that, I think, on Democracy Now! And apparently Trump's people were like, no, like, we can't really do that.
Yeah.
That's not like an option.
I mean, it's also like, why are you shooting an unarmed person? Just by definition, that seems like unbelievable. Like, an unarmed person is rushing me, so I will shoot. Like, if I was on the street and someone totally unarmed looks like they're trying to football tackle me, my first thought is not like, I'm going to pull out a gun and shoot them.
Yeah, like, the goal is not to get cops to shoot black people like in slightly less deadly ways, but still shoot them. The point is to like get rid of the shootings and possibly the cops. Like you can look at police in other countries. Even like Japan is a really good example. The cops in Japan, they carry guns. There's not a lot tons of guns in the country, but the police do carry them because the because the United States insisted upon it actually. But that's getting deep into American history. But
I didn't know about that.
but the thing is, like, they discharge their firearms in the whole nation like once or twice a year. And people like try to come at them with a knife. What they have is like a big long stick, a tool. It looks like the thing you rescue someone out of a pool with, and they like will put 3 or 4 of them on dude and like get the knife from him. They just have different tactics and techniques, and they're not focused on like shooting people, which means like killing people. You can't separate shooting from killing. Like I feel like people are trying to like create that barrier. It's like, oh no, there's no shooting is killing. That's the point. If you want to, if the thing you want is, tepid, reformed, at least you could say something that makes sense, like training not to shoot, and training, give them different tools, non-lethal tools, and actual non-lethal tools like big long sticks, and not like tear gas and rubber bullets, which are, can be lethal, as we've seen examples of this very like weekend. It's almost, I don't even know what the word for it is, like irony that you have all these protests about police violence. The initial reaction is to downplay it, and then the police do a bunch more violence in response. That proves that people probably weren't angry enough at the start of this.
I mean, it just feels so through the looking glass. Like, we can shoot satellites into space, but we can't find a way to detain an unarmed, like, robbery suspect without murdering them. I mean, it just like, really?
Yeah. Not good. Got to show you guys this one other thing, because I want to make sure that we give Biden his due in terms of crediting his various sources. Sorry, what is this thing? Why can't I have I'm sharing it. Okay. Can you guys see that?
I saw it earlier when it was larger. I think it said that in Gaza, the IDF aims for the legs.
Yeah. So it's a photo. This is another comparison. So we see Biden in this clip advocating for cops to shoot unarmed people in the leg. I'm so depressed that this is the message that's going to be played across the country from the presumptive leader of the opposition party. And then in Gaza protests, IDF aim for the legs. Policy of shooting at lower body of rioters is leaving a mark on the Strip, with many young men walking on crutches and health services struggling to cope.
Yeah, and I mean, just that juxtaposition is one thing, but the fact is that story about shooting the legs, IDF shooting Palestinian protest demonstrators in the legs, went like viral like a few months back. Like that, is there no one on Biden's staff, or does he not listen to them to tell him like shooting them in the leg? Like you don't want to be associated with that if you're telling us you're going to be the one who's going to bring us a better, brighter world from the evil darkness, of Donald Trump. Like I don't know how he's just so like ignorant about things that I know about. So definitely the dude who runs for president should know about them.
It's funny though, because I actually think that it's the most rational thing about this whole thing. Like, I imagine his advisors being like, look, no one cares about it when the Israelis do it to Palestinians.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine any of his people being like, that's problematic because it reminds us of the, if only. But it is a really disgusting.
Maybe they just need a unity commission to forward him the recommendation.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. What should we do about this? I can't like. Why is Bernie? He's just.
I mean, I don't know, and like, I don't want to. My feel about Bernie now is let him do whatever he wants, because I think that everyone plays a historical role, I think that he has cracked open a whole conversation that we were not having before 2016. So if he does things that I don't like, I feel like that's cool. I think the whole not me, us thing was a good framing. You know what I'm saying? He was not the sole leader. And, so whatever. I mean, he may disappoint us. I think he's already disappointed a lot of people. But at the same token, like now we can kind of run with that ball and start to explore these lanes in a big way. And like that's the thing I think to keep pushing on and keep, pushing the envelope on where, so overall net positive. But yeah, I think like I think anyone who has already sort of said, like, this is the only country in quote unquote advanced country that in like living memory has not developed a new constitution to like meet the realities of modern society. Like we can have free healthcare and all these different things. And I think just like opening up the conversation of why we don't have as basic rights, all of these like clearly essential and easy to provide things is in and of itself a great gateway to like a whole broader conversation that I'm grateful for. And so, but at the end of the day, anyone who's already sort of decided like they're going to work within the system to address those contradictions, I think is to some degree bound to disappoint you because the structure of the country, this 1787 Constitution, is deliberately and forthrightly, by the founders' own words, designed to prevent progress and designed to enshrine property rights above all else. So like when that's the case, like what can we really expect at the end of the day?
Right. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that was pretty much it. So yeah, so I feel like it's not so much that Bernie's disappointing as that like we're just seeing the results of what he has decided is the best way to make change. Now we don't have to agree with that, and if we don't, cool, let's keep pushing. But I also think like putting too much on him also makes it seem like he was out here like Huey Newton saying pick up the gun and overthrow the government, which was like not true. So I also don't think you can hold someone to a standard that they never presented themselves.
No, yeah. What were you gonna say, Leslie?
Oh yeah, I agree, and I do. Eugene, you just kind of made me realize, like, well, I am, even though he didn't win, I think we're in a much better place that he ran and lost than if he didn't run at all. Like I think everything is just better because of that. And it's worth saying because a lot of people were saying he should not run. Lots of people, even people on the left, were like, no, Bernie, your time is done. Well, it was nobody's fucking time.
Yeah, your time is done. You missed, you're too old. Let's give it to, useful spring chicken that is Joe Biden.
There was nobody. There was never a name that was floated out there that made any sense. Like nobody had an alternative, and that's like the long-term problem. Because I mean, I talk about this on my show Struggle Session at patreon.com/struggle session all the time, where I say like the reason it's the same thing with Sanders and Corbyn. We had an entire like generation where every single person on the left broadly that got any sort of power got there by selling completely the fuck out.
Oh yeah,
like there's going to it might take like a decade before there's enough people worth a shit running for office that can actually like get the money and the power and have the reach to get there. This is just the start. It has to be built up because it's been nothing but like sellouts like for the past 30 years.
And I do think though, like I'm disappointed, and I don't think just it's an inevitable structural thing way. I think he could be playing more of a role now. I also have a lot of empathy for him. The guy like had a heart attack, has been maligned, vilified, lost his, not because of the race, but he also like his daughter-in-law died during this. But I think he is could do so much right now. I also do think that his running has helped, like you were saying, Leslie, in that I can't think the last time anyone remotely political, like remotely in politics in any high level, was like so openly in a state of outrage, which is so good. Like it's so good for people to remind people that that these things are not normal and that they don't need to be doing this or accepting this. And I think that that's like something that like is really important, like it gave people a hope and expectation. I think that There's a lot more to be done, obviously. And the irony is it's an interesting time also to reflect on. I talked about this with Assad Hader a couple of weeks ago, but the role of the individual versus the masses. Like Bernie Sanders gets that it's not, not me, not me, us, but also human nature. I think, like either nature or nurture, whatever. Leaders are very compelling. Like storytellers historically are very compelling. People who make things plain, right? Who make it clear what people are feeling and where to go with that stuff. And so I don't know. And sometimes I think the left is a little dismissive of that because they appreciate the masses and the role of movement so much, which is good. But it's like, I don't know what we're going to do. I think we have to kind of do both at the same time, because certainly the other side has a charismatic guy.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, the goal is not to not have leaders. It's just to have, not only many leaders, but also a structure that allows sort of people to grow and become leaders from where they are and where people feel empowered, so that if I go down, there is sort of like a next man up, as we say in football, kind of reality. But I agree with you. I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently bad in leadership. I think that, ultimately all the most successful movements are grounded in building leadership. I'm reading a great book right now called Civil Rights Unionism, about Local 22, the food, tobacco, and agriculture and allied workers, which is a left-led union. And I think, anyone who wants to read it, it's a deep story about how, the shop floor leaders of these Black working class people were able to lead this mass movement, unionize people, and bring, this whole sense of dignity to work, and also change the calculus for Black people in Winston-Salem until the Red Scare, of course, crushed them. But like, that's the point. They had many leaders, and out of the 10,000 people, maybe there was like 200 like leaders. But like those 200 people were not just like random people who like moved to the forefront, but the elected, representatives that people felt could help represent to the world their dreams and aspirations. And like, I think that's not only totally okay, but totally natural. And I think this idea that somehow, it's antithetical, it makes no sense to me, in the discourse. I mean, I know it's popular, but I just don't understand what roots it has in any social movements that ever do anything.
Yeah. Anyway, well, do you want to stay on? Eugene, you've been on for a while. It's late. I don't know. Leslie, do you want to talk more? Take some questions, or?
We can take questions from the chat.
Well, I'll leave it to Leslie then, to hit it out of the park here. I really appreciate you guys.
Great.
This is really, you had me up until 11:30. It's like hanging out with my friends, just talking about politics. So would love to do it again.
Yeah,
Great talking to you for the first time, Eugene.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm an avid Twitter follower of you, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent. All right, y'all.
Okay,
and thanks to everyone for watching.
And I'll put a link for your show and your Twitter. Great. Woo, that was fun, huh?
Yes.
I say that like we're not still being recorded.
Yeah, we're still on.
That bullshit. Thank God that's over. Just kidding. But Leslie, I haven't had a one-on-one with you in a while.
Yeah, it's been a minute, I guess.
Yeah.
So
what's going on?
How's your mom?
She's good. I got to put in a photo. I'll find a screen grab of my mom and Bodie and Leslie. It's a really cute photo. Really cute. Yeah. People who may follow Leslie on Twitter and may just listen to the struggle session. I don't know if they know what a sweet face you have. I hope that's not embarrassing you, but like, you never know the scorched earth, like like many shots fired. I was not thinking that, obviously, when I said that. Now it's a very, many non-punch pulling. Many shots at the foot fired. No, many
at the foot, at the leg.
Foot shots, yeah. He's such a little an angelic face, but and he's a very kind person, of course. But that's what we're going to spend the next part of the show. We're just going to talk about his features. No, okay. What's going on? Tell us about the political pop culture, or whatever you want to talk about, or let's see if we got any questions from people.
Any questions in the chat?
Of course I have respect for Bernie. Any questions for? Okay, let's see. But I want to know more. I want to know more about like what you're seeing, like what kind of neighborhood are you living in now?
So it's like one of these newer communities that are built during the like urban sprawl of DC. So it's like very like expensive like condos, like $500,000 condos in places that like they're like now like just now still chopping down the forest, like there's still deer running around. Like I would
Wow.
see people all the times like, I used to hunt out here like 15 years ago, and now it's all torn down for like strip malls and shit. So it's a very like strange and artificial place. Whatever character this place had was, a very rural character that's like largely been erased now. Like they're bringing the metro out here in the next few years. It's really not. It's really not. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I know this alienated kind of living in the suburbs because so many people here they're not from around here. They don't really work here. They work in DC. They moved here or to a neighboring town because the rent was slightly cheaper, or the homes were cheaper. The rent it ain't any cheaper at all than DC, but the homes you can save a little. You can actually buy a home out here. Very expensive and very ugly home, but you can buy one out here. You can buy yourself a little McMansion. But yeah, that's. I mean, it's very I'm kind of glad I'm here, because if I were somewhere else, if I was in New York, if I was in LA, or Minneapolis, like there's so many places where things are like, it seems so intense and so many things are going down. But for the vast majority of people, whether we're talking about COVID or we're talking about the protests, life is going on more or less like usual for a lot of people. Like maybe COVID was a little bit more intense and affecting and life disrupting, but like for a lot of Americans, like America is just so big and so wide and so diverse in a way that like you could live your I mean, if you can live your whole life in America without being a black person, which a lot of people do, like you can live your life without running into like a Black Lives Matter protest. And even though we did have a demonstration here. It wasn't little, it was big, but it wasn't anything similar to what's going on
Right.
in other places. And I feel like some people like Jack, his hair is just on fire constantly. Oh my God, this is so crazy, this is so nuts.
Right.
And it was like, and I like
He
didn't
lives in
want to break.
LA.
Yeah, in LA it is, but like in the suburbs, it's like is more or less like usual. It's just like some people are wearing masks now, and that's kind of it.
Right. Checking out the questions.
Yeah, funny how a 500,000 home is somehow affordable, but for whom? Not the working family, nor the poor. It's like Loudoun County has the highest per capita income in the country because of all the government contractors. These aren't government, workers per se, but these are people who work for like Boeing and stuff
yeah.
like that, like all the military contractors. There's a ton of money here to buy like ugly houses, like the condos. I'm looking at them right now across the street from me. They started at $500,000. They're like duplexes, like you're paying $500,000 to be attached to someone else in like a town, like a split townhouse that's like 4 floors up. You gotta walk to the 4th floor to put your laundry up, like, and you're paying $500,000 for that, and it's like down the street from the water treatment plant. Like, I don't know, but like people with money don't know how to spend it, I guess.
Yeah.
Ian James says he's got some good news. Colorado Democrats unveil sweeping police accountability bill. Like, but that would be nice. Is it good, Ian? Is it actually like good, or is it just like bullshit, just covering their asses? Because that is kind of like another thing. Like, there's probably some places in the country that are having like really like good changes made. So in Minneapolis in particular, I saw that they were getting rid of the resource officers in schools, which are like the police officers in school. Like, that's good. Like,
21
that's
Jump
nice.
Street program.
Yeah, that's nice at least.
Thanks, Antigone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Yeah, it's interesting, like how this is going to. I wonder what's next because. Oh, sorry. Are you reading?
Oh, Phil has a question.
Oh yeah,
Artifice Fowl streaming in
a
few days. Is this a test run for the Black Widow movie? It might be. It might.
Wait for 1 second. That's so problematic. I can't believe you asked that of Leslie and not me. It's because I'm a woman, right? Okay.
Like, because Artemis Fowl, that's $125 million budget. Yeah, that's a major movie to put on streaming. I guess they figured like they didn't find a place in the calendar for it. Black Widow going to cost slightly 150 to 200 million. Jesus Christ, how do they spend $200 million on the Black Widow movie? The whole point of Black Widow is all she is like someone with guns. Like, you don't have to spend $200 million making a movie about a lady who goes around shooting people. So maybe not, because I think Black Widow, if there are, because I mean, it's like it's all coming from the same pot, right? I'm pretty sure Artemis Fowl. Yeah, that's a Disney movie. So if they're putting Artemis Fowl on streaming, that means they're losing out money, and so that it's even more important to make that money back with a Black Widow movie. So it's not like, I don't know if it's would that be fungible, not fungible? But the fact that they're putting Artemis Fowl on streaming, probably losing like a few $100 million with that move, means that it's even more important that they like the other movies that they can actually put in theaters.
I saw Parasite, by the way, Leslie.
Oh yeah, what did you think about it?
I liked it. I saw in the theaters, which I'm glad I did. I thought it was I found it a little boring and I found it got a lot more interesting when it wasn't just rich versus poor, but it was like working class versus poor working class and the rich. Do you know what I mean? Like that. I'm glad it shifted a little bit because I got a little bit bored with the like, I get it. There's rich people, there's poor people. But I think that's intentional. Like, I think that's the design of the film because it like sneaks up on you when that other thing happens, which I want, I guess. Wait, are you the one who like doesn't believe in announcing spoilers?
Oh, it depends on the film. I think with Parasite, it's kind of in the middle ground. It's not one of those ones where I would say you absolutely have to avoid spoilers in order to enjoy the film. There are like a few twists and turns, and they are unexpected and surprising, but it's more of a instead of like a oh my god, I can't believe that happened. If it was a oh my god, I can't believe that happened, like a Hereditary, that's the film you want to go in not knowing what's going to happen. But with Parasite, I think, it's more just like, oh, you get a nice satisfaction, but you can still enjoy the movie without knowing going in. And I did like really enjoy it. I think I really, really like that movie. I think it's just like a really great movie. I found it very interesting. I like a lot of his work. I love Snowpiercer as well, but I hear the TV show is not not that good. From what I'm hearing.
I liked it when it wasn't just the very rich and the poor family, but there was another poor family that comes into the mix. I thought that was really interesting. But what I found so entertaining about this is that I was listening to like a Lincoln Center film podcast, and someone was like, there's been a lot of talk about the subtext of class. And I didn't really realize it at the beginning when I saw it. And it was like, what? Subtext? It was text. It like couldn't be more overtly about the haves and have-nots.
We talk about this on Struggle Session a bit, patreon.com/struggle session, where like a certain type, we call them filmers. Like you have gamers who, and it's kind of is sometimes used as a pejorative for people who are maybe too into games and game culture. We have the term filmers for people who are sometimes maybe who like films, but are maybe a little bit too much into films and film culture. And there's this filmer idea that anything good has to be subtext and subtextual. And so if they like something, so a lot of people have knocked Parasite and Snowpiercer for being too on the nose and direct with their class analysis. Like a lot of people have complained, knock Bong Joon-ho for this, which is really bizarre thing to do. And they'll also, but that person, I think he was trying to praise the movie in the film or language, which is like, oh, there's so much deep subtext here. There is so deep. It's so deep. There's layers and layers to it. When there's really that's not the type of filmmaker he is. Like, he hits you over the head with his ideas, and it's still good and brilliant and intelligent and intellectual. And I wish I had the link to drop that somebody sent me. But the idea that, every idea has to be subtext, I think Matt Christmas talks a bit about this, was actually something that part of the CIA cooked up, as far as art and criticism and writing concern. Like, that idea was boosted by the CIA at some point during the Red Scare. I wish I had a link for it, but
was that because that's how they found the accusation? Like, they were like, that's a communist subtext.
I don't remember exactly, because I was trying to find the link the other day to it, but they were basically saying the way to because we know CIA works, and the military industrial complex works with Hollywood, tells them what to put in their films sometimes. And the idea is that that basically they said, we don't want any more clear, text and allegories. We want everything to be subtextual, and we want to convince people. And they did convince all the filmers that subtext means intelligence. Anything, on its face is,
Bad
obvious
propaganda.
and dumb and, poorly made.
And not effective propaganda, right? Also, I assume.
Yeah.
This guy, though, I think was really just really that out of touch. He was because I remember the people he was having the chat with, and he's a professional film analyst. He was like, I didn't even realize that. I didn't think it he said something like, I don't think it came down on one side or the other.
That's their fate. They don't want anything to come down on one side or the other, because that's vulgar,
Right,
to
vulgar,
say
right.
that, say, I'll come down all the way.
Nuanced. But he was almost pushing back on, what was weird and annoying is he was almost pushing back on, how much was it really about that? Anyway, and his co-hosts were like, I don't even think it was subtext. It was text. I don't know how you could not think about it the first time you saw it. Anyway, but what about the problem? I think it's actually a really offensive movie because it reappropriates. What is it? Reappropriates Native American culture. Is that?
Yeah. I thought that was interesting because it's
So just to explain, this was a critique that I'm making fun of.
Yeah. So because the little kid in the film, and this is part of showing their upper class status, even though they're a Korean family. The movie takes place in Korea. They have bougie, these international bougie signifiers. The kid is doted on by the mother. She gives him everything he wants. She's convinced that he's an artistic genius, and she also buys him all this Native American cosplay bullshit that they also make one of their servants put on in order to perform for the son. And I think the point of that was, just to show that was Bong Joon-ho giving something for us Americans, oh yeah, they're just like your neighbors, where they appropriate Native American culture in a really offensive way.
Yeah. Right, but some people were accused the film
of being racist, and when the film was just saying no, rich people are racist.
Right. I know. I think that's so funny when people confuse content with perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depiction with endorsement.
Yeah, exactly right. Schindler's List was so anti-Semitic. Anything else that I can't remember what it was about. I was gonna ask you about a movie. Oh, someone asked, I wonder how theaters can come back and still be profitable or how movies can be made without risk.
Well, if you've been paying attention to what they're doing, what Disney's program is all along, is to like try to lessen the risk by putting all their eggs in these big tent pole. Well, we can't even call them tent pole films because the idea of the tent pole is that everything else would fit under the tent. But if they're just a whole bunch of tent poles, like they're not really holding up anything but themselves. So I'm sure, I'm sure the industry is going to have to go through some significant changes. But what I would expect is, more franchises, more Marvel attempts at Marvel type stuff. Definitely lessening the importance of actual talent, from the union workers, unionized workers who build the sets, rig the lighting, all that shit. They're going to put the squeeze on them. They're also going to be putting the squeeze on the actors, the superstars. They're going to be trying to tell them, hey, yes, your salary is usually X, Y, and Z, but we're going through so much right now, and you owe us for your career. And if you don't, renegotiate this contract, we're just going to recast you, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to do the same thing to the directors, to the cinematographers. Definitely going to do it to all the CGI people who make most of the movie, basically. Nowadays, the executives are like all the corporations have been doing. They've been using the crisis as a way to enact, their own little mini disaster capitalism moves inside their industry, and we'll see more of that. Like, I saw something really disturbing. The TV show The Blacklist, their season finale, they didn't have time to finish filming it with the actual actors, so they had this really cheap replacement, CGI replacement that was almost trying to be comic booky, but it didn't all look like a comic book. It looked like absolute garbage, and they aired it on TV with the actors now as voice actors. And I saw that, and I was like, oh, I bet the executives wish they could do that with every show. Just put on something really ugly, really cheap, maybe pay James Spader half his rate since he's just doing voice work. And that from now on, that's entertainment. We see it with if you turn on your TV, half the time we're seeing stuff like this. People sitting in their rooms streaming. That's saving all these companies a lot of money. That is saving them a lot of money to be able to say that someone sitting in their living room with a webcam is a TV show now. They bought John Krasinski's show.
Oh yeah,
The
podcast,
good news,
right?
they want more. They want everyone to be as powerless as the average YouTube streamer, because then they get to basically save a bunch on production, keep all the money. They don't have to deal with actors making demands or anything like that, or directors or anything like that. They want Hollywood views this ultimately as an opportunity. Oh, it's also terrible for small independent movie theaters. The big ones, the chains, they can probably weather the storm, but the independent theater is going to have a problem. Same thing with independent music venues. Hey, I would recommend everyone go to your independent music venues website, check out what they're doing to try and survive on Qubit. During COVID, I know the Littlefield in New York, they contacted Katie and I so we can do a stream for them, because we did a live show for them. So all these really venues, they're really suffering, and we don't want it to just be Ticketmaster and Live Nation venues that are the only place that you can see music from now on. But that's what Ticketmaster and Live Nation want and will continue to try to push. Frankly, I'm surprised they haven't, because this is a move that WWE has pulled, where they'll get the local government to basically give them a license to run shows, and hassle all the independent wrestling promotions and say, oh, you're not licensed, basically making it illegal to not be a big time mega corporation, and I would not be surprised if the lobbyists from Ticketmaster, Live Nation, etc., or working on some legislation where, oh, if you want to do a live music show from now on, it has to be in the building this size with this much, medical security or whatever, medical staff, X, Y, and Z, in order to make putting on live music shows of any real size impossible or unaffordable for independent venues, because Ticketmaster and Live Nation, they can take a loss for a year or two, and then come back and be the only people running shows. They're fine with that.
I miss popcorn.
Well, they do sell it at the grocery store. It's never as good though.
Not as good. And I don't even need butter on the popcorn. In fact, I don't like butter on the popcorn. I just like when it's hot, it's so good too. When it's freshly popped. I really miss popcorn. Not gonna lie. I like the experience of sitting in a theater, eating popcorn. I have some interesting popcorn eating habits. If you want, I'll share them. I take the ball, the popcorn has the ball and the little things around it.
Yes.
So I bite off all the little things around it with the kernel parts. And then I'm just left with like a soft ball, like a puff. I do that to a bunch of them. And then I just have the puffs only.
Puffs only.
It's really good. It's really good. It's almost like turns the popcorn into like the cheese puffs, not the doodles, but puffs. Yeah. But yeah, I like it with Diet Coke.
Popcorn and Diet Coke. That's a good combo.
It's a really good combo. Yeah. So good.
That's why I love talking to you, Katie. I feel like I'm on an episode of Seinfeld.
Thank you. I'd rather Curb Your Enthusiasm, but I'll take that too.
Hey, either way, kind of the same thing. I like Curb too. We haven't talked about this. We meant to talk about this.
What?
Why you like Curb but not Seinfeld?
Okay, because Seinfeld is always like trying not to laugh at his own joke, that expression. He's like, it's obnoxious. I'm like, you're not that funny. And because I find Larry David is, even though George is supposed to be Larry David, right, on Seinfeld.
Yeah.
But Larry David as himself is much funnier to me than the character of Seinfeld. Also, it's not as corny because it's not the same sitcom style, and there's cursing. It just seems much more. Oh my God, there's so many funny episodes of that show.
So you like it because it's slightly edgier.
It's much edgier. Seinfeld always, I have to admit though, Seinfeld, maybe if I'd watched a bunch in a row, I'd like it, because my friend Joya, shout out to Joya, made me watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I didn't like the first episode. She was like, Katie, you got to do this, and she made me watch a bunch in a row, and then I got into Curb. Because at first I thought Curb was like self-indulgent, inside jokes, the same way I do with Seinfeld. So maybe I'd enjoy Seinfeld. Maybe I should give it a try.
Yeah, like I can't imagine liking one, not liking the other ultimately. Because the first time I watched Curb, I didn't like it at all. I thought it was garbage. But when I watched a few episodes of it, I got really into it. It's one of my favorite shows. So I would definitely recommend, binge some Seinfeld. You don't want to start with the first season. Start with season 3, and then you can go back later eventually to it. But you want to start with like season 3, and it is really good. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy the dynamics. And if Elaine, there's no character like Elaine in Curb. It's so focused on Larry and his friends. Is much more of a masculine show than Curb Your Enthusiasm. Than Seinfeld.
Seinfeld, yeah.
Yeah, Seinfeld has Elaine has her own
world,
orbit of characters, her own world, her boyfriends, her bosses. She has her own thing going on from her perspective as a woman, and you don't really get that in Curb. It's almost always just from Larry's perspective,
because the wife is totally the straight man.
Yeah, the Cheryl. Wife is 100%. Yeah, Cheryl doesn't ever get
Larry.
to do it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what she said all the time. Now it works with her
Right.
because Larry is such a horrible person
Right.
that you spend the entire time just like being amazed that she bothers to
Right.
put up with him. Like that
Right.
that sort of like nagging wife usually is terrible in a show, but because Larry is so obviously
Yeah.
horrible, she's actually incredibly reasonable. Like
Yeah, you're sympathize
like
with her. Yeah.
almost too reasonable. Like you could get mad at her for being too nice to
Right.
him because he's
Right.
so bad.
Yeah.
But she doesn't actually have her own funny stuff happening usually because Larry has to be so horrible. But she is a like good actress.
She's a very good actress.
I
Yeah.
saw her in something else.
What
I
was she
forget. She was
in?
really funny.
But she's really good. I mean, she's really good at improv. It's funny, like, so like Jeff, I guess, and I think Richard, what's his name? Richard Lewis is funny too.
Richard Lewis is really great.
Yeah.
Richard Lewis is great.
And they just play themselves. They play each other. And I love when you can tell that things weren't written into the script, like weren't planned. Like there's this one episode where they're just standing somewhere, sitting somewhere. I remember, and Larry takes a sip of coffee, and he's like, "That's a good cup of coffee." Like there's nothing there. He just says it and like laughs at himself, kind of.
Good night, James. Thank you for
Good night,
staying
James.
up with us.
Do you see what I think is so interesting about comedy is when it like is so niche, but niche in a universal way, which is what a lot of the best comedy is, right? Like people who don't know New York City Jews like Seinfeld.
Yeah. Because it gives you a peek into like a world, a different world, and it feels like an authentic peak, kind of.
Right.
Like even though Seinfeld is still like very kind of orchestrated '90s sitcom,
Right.
it still has like this life and vibrancy to it because they like have so many random people and so many neighbors and boyfriends and people they get in fights with on the street and delis and donut shops and soup
Right.
shops, and like it just gives you like this real, like it just feels like a real world unto itself, or like a peek into another life. And I think Curb does a pretty good job of that too. But Curb, for this is bringing it back to the politics, to the class analysis. Curb is based on like the real life rich ass Larry David now, who's very rich. All his friends are rich, and like the show doesn't like ignore this, but it is in that very, very like bougie world. Like when it came out, when they put out the new season, it took me a while to kind of get back into the world after like Bernie Sanders, like how you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm after the 2016 election, where class is at the forefront, and you just have these rich douchebags and their fake problems all the time. It takes a while to get into the world. Seinfeld's a little different.
They're cousins, right? They're related, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Henry Louis Gates, he revealed the did you guys see that when he revealed their DNA results? Did you see that, Leslie?
No, I didn't see the video. I just heard about it. I didn't watch it. Yeah.
Kelly, am I allowed to show a little bit of that? Can I clip it out later? I'm asking my producer, Kelly.
If you get stream banned.
Yeah, am I going to get stream banned? Can I show like 20 seconds? What's the rule?
The rule is that wherever the mega corporation decides to take down your channel, that goes. That's the only rule. I say that from experience with friends. One of our contributors, Shannon Strucci, she's famous for making the videos about parasocial relationships, and she had like a 3-second clip, and like her things are like documentaries, so she has fair use to show clips of things. But like they took down this video. This has tons and tons of views. Everybody's talking about it on the internet. They took it down because of like this small clip from a song from someone who's on, I think, maybe Universal Music Group. And they took it down, and they would not tell her why they took it down. They would literally not tell her why they took it down. It took her months to just get told, this is the small part of your video that was offensive, that was flagged, so you can remove it and put it back up. And the only reason she ever found that out was because somebody at YouTube likes her videos and was able to personally help her with it. So that's the only way. Like, if you have any problems,
Wow.
like, don't go to customer service. Like,
Wow.
go to LinkedIn and see who
Yeah.
actually works at the company that can maybe get something done for you.
That's crazy. Yeah. Well, it's very cute when he finds out. He's like, "You're kidding. Get out of here." It's very cute.
Oh,
So,
yeah, I did. I remember that. I remember your
See?
impression. Yeah.
I brought it to you. I tapped into, yeah, that was, and he was like a Buttigieg donor, Larry. Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, the whole point of Curb Your Enthusiasm and Seinfeld kind of is that Larry David is a piece of shit. He's a funny
Right.
piece of shit, but he's a piece of shit. So I'm
Well,
not
you know what's
surprised.
very interesting about him is that he also has a real like moral code. Like, he's an asshole and he's selfish and a piece of shit, but he has this moral code. Like, remember, he won't laugh. He won't dance with his wife in front of a widow, and he won't acknowledge playing golf in front of a guy in a wheelchair.
Like he has these weird. So
They
is it
sound so rabbinical when you say them out loud.
is it a moral code, or is it like stubbornness complying with like some sort of reactionary discomfort with certain things, not wanting to be displeased, or is it like real moral indignation? I think you can probably come away with saying either one.
That's where the Bernie relative comes in.
Yeah.
That's the Bernie side of the family
It's the
coming
Bernie
through,
side
and
of the
his
family.
moral indignation. Yeah. No, I think that I honestly do think that he is like, I think he thinks it's wrong. Like, I think some of the things he dislikes are also things that he thinks are wrong.
Are wrong, truly wrong.
Yeah,
truly
like
wrong.
not just annoying, but wrong. Like, okay, so there's the
Wrong,
ridiculous
wrong.
stuff, like when he goes out to, oh my God, so funny when he and Mary Steenburgen and Ted Danson and the wife, they all go out bowling, and Larry's like, Mary's great. I could do without Ted. Calls everything heaven. Everything's heaven enough. And the next day you hear him, he gets a phone call. It's like, hello? He's like, oh, hi, Mary. Yeah, I had a great time last night. Oh my God, it was just heaven. Oh, really? He does? I didn't even know that. And then they go out shopping, and he picks up the Mary Sternbergen's mom is in town for whatever reason. They go shopping, and he picks up her glass, his own glass, he thinks. And she's like, oh, Larry, honey, that's mine. And he like spits it out. Like, that's just like, you know, that's quirky and like annoying. There's no justice or ethics there.
Yeah.
But I do feel like the thing with the wife, the playing golf, and then there's the like very cynical, like his mom died, so he's like using that as an excuse for everything.
Yeah. He does, and he also like whenever he feels like he's been treated unfairly, he will not ever let it go, right? Like, is that a moral thing? Like, does he feel, and you know, sometimes they do show that they do show like someone else with the same problem or somebody else with a little problem, he'll like step in and say, this is wrong, and I'm going to take it to this extreme and make everything worse. He does do that a lot. Like with remember when he meets the blind gentleman, and like he was having some issue, and Larry David like took it to like this next level where he like escalated, and it's like, so I don't know, maybe he's maybe his heart is somewhat in the right place, even though his head is not.
It's funny. Yes, I agree. And then what's the other, but that also, remember, they're walking down the street and the blind guy is asking for help moving. And he's like, can you guys help me? I have to move for a little bit. And Larry David, like, who's there with Richard Lewis, shakes his head, doesn't say anything. He shakes his head no. And Richard Lewis is like, you're going to say no to a blind guy? And Larry's like, are you going to say it? Like, I didn't do it in front of a blind guy. And then they help him for hours. The editing on that show was so good. Yeah. It's a great montage of them moving his stuff. And then at the end, they're talking, and Larry accuses him of of taking advantage of them.
Oh yeah,
and Richard's like, his blind license.
Yeah, he gets super pissed off because he feels like he's been treated unfairly by the guy. Oh, somebody Cognitive says in the chat, Katie, you should check out Peep Show. My wife really likes Peep Show. I can't watch. It's too intense. Like, it's all the angles are like just like head on with the person. It's like a thing, just a thing they do. Like all the angles are like front facing, like this, like that film technique they used in like the late 90s, early 2000s. A lot. Was it Demi that used it a lot in the Manchurian Candidate remake? Anyway, every scene is like that. So sometimes it's too intense for me. I can't relax. It's a very funny show and very good actors, but it's like very much like feels like in your face, like you're watching, I don't know, like some David Lynch thing too as well.
Right. Okay, I'll watch it. It's a comedy or
Yeah, it's a comedy. It's a very like it's kind of similar. It shares some DNA with Curb. It definitely shares some Curb. Yeah. Yeah, it's all first person POV.
Did you like the episode about the Seder, the Passover Seder, where he invites he is in the neighborhood, and very early on in the episode you learn that there's like a sex offender who moved into the show?
Yes, the sex
into the neighborhood, yeah. And so it's so funny. So he sees that there's a sex offender who moved in, and then Larry's like getting a newspaper from like he paid his 25 cents or 50 cents or whatever, and opens up the thing to get a newspaper, and it's Rob Corddry plays him, and he recognizes he's a sex offender. He's like, do you want one? And he's like, no, I'll buy it myself. I'll buy my own. Like he also has a moral code.
Yeah,
so
the
he's
sex offender has a more. Yeah.
So he puts it in the 25 cents, whatever. And then Larry like doesn't want to, but I think Rob Corddry really helps him with his golfing swing. And then he was like, what are you doing for Passover? And Larry's like, oh, we're having people over.
Yeah, and he ends up,
and then he's like, what about you? He's like, nothing, no plans. And Larry's like, you can come over, but you don't have to. He's like, no, I'd love to.
Yeah.
And he shows up, and so then Larry goes home, and he's like, goes to Cheryl, like, how was your day? Good, blah, blah. He got the snacks, whatever. And then he's like going up the stairs. He's like, oh, by the way, I invited someone to the Seder. She's like, okay, who? And he's like, the sex offender. And she's like, Larry, you are not bringing a sex offender to my Seder. And then
you see, that was her being a nagging wife,
right?
In a way, but in this context, it doesn't make her look bad at all. Maybe a little bit bad, because I think we do believe in restorative. We do believe in restorative justice.
I know that's something you could see Larry doing too.
Yeah,
like saying that, right? And then, oh my god, that whole episode is so funny. And then Cheryl, Jeff's brother-in-law comes to the Seder, and Jeff about his brother-in-law, he's like, my brother-in-law, he's a little, and Larry's like conservative. He's like, yeah. And then they cut to, he's defending George Bush as like the greatest president ever. And then they hide the afikomen, which is like the matzah that you hide, and then the kids find it, and then they get some money when they do. And he hides it. And after that point, Rob Corddry, the sex offender who's there, is like, Larry, I have to talk to you about something. And Larry's like, I don't want to know. Like, I'm not a professional. You need to talk to a professional therapist. He's like, no. It's something I saw. And he's like, what? And he's like, when you hid the afikomen, I saw the conservative father-in-law. He saw it, and then he whispered something in his son's ear.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened. I think that's why he found it. And Larry's like, then at dinner, he's like, John, oh, buddy, old pal, how did you know what afikomen was? Anyway, it's very, very, very funny.
See, I just want to say, like, just from watching sitcoms, I learned more about Jewish culture than I ever have. There's so much from between Seinfeld, Kirby Enthusiasm. There was something else I was watching where I learned about
Mrs. Maisels. I don't watch that, but was that it?
No, I don't watch Miss Maisel, but I think that has a lot. I don't know.
She's very. I think it's very Jewish. Apparently.
Yeah, I think it's very Jewish. Mrs.
What else
Maisel
has high Jewish content?
Yeah, I really don't like Maisel because it's a comedy about comedy that is no longer funny. Like none of the jokes that she does as a stand-up artist are like funny to people in this century anymore. Like. And they didn't spice it up for her. They tried to like keep it like authentic to the humor and jokes of the time, and they're just not funny jokes anymore.
Yeah, right. But maybe you watch it. Maybe it's like a Mad Men type of show where it's like you're supposed to be amazed.
It is more. It does feel like Mad Men, but I don't. It's not really a comedy. It's
Right.
like, it's just like a. It's like a drama.
Right. Yeah. My mom likes it. I know. But the thing I also like about Larry is he's married to it's like there's a lot of funny Jewish, non-Jewish collisions. Like when he pretends to be Orthodox. Do you remember that one? And he goes, that's the edible underwear episode.
I don't think I've seen that one.
You didn't see the, oh my God, edible underwear one? Oh
Edible
my God.
Underwear, I guess I have
And
to
the
watch
Orthodox
that
one? Okay, that's a really good one. And he has to pretend to be Orthodox. So he has to pretend that Susie's his wife because as an Orthodox Jew,
Oh,
he
yeah.
obviously wouldn't be married to
Oh,
Cheryl.
I did not. I definitely haven't.
Oh,
seen
it's
that
really
one.
funny. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. There's a Seinfeld episode where they talk about something called Shiksa appeal, where
Oh, yeah.
where Elaine keeps all the Jewish men in her life all of a sudden start like becoming obsessed with her because she has Shiksa appeal now.
But she's Jewish, right? On the
No,
show?
she's not Jewish. She's not Jewish.
Oh.
Elaine isn't Jewish.
Really?
No,
but
she
Julie
just has
Louis
curly.
Dreyfus is,
I
right?
don't know. I don't
I
know.
assume. I think she's
She's a-
actually French Jewish.
She is a billionaire, I should say. She is.
Oh, so you're saying she's Jewish?
No.
Just kidding.
She is from a very, very, very
Oh, right. She
wealthy
does.
family.
Yeah. I think she's
Yeah.
Jewish, but I'm not sure in real life. Oh, so she's a shiksa. That's funny. Yeah, shiksa appeal. Shiksa actually means abomination. My mom is says it's a terrible word, but I it is a pretty thing, bad word. But goyim. I don't think it's so offensive. Do you know what verklempt means?
Yeah, I've heard it in context. I couldn't. I knew if somebody used it in a sentence, I would know. Like you're at a loss for words or something like that. Is it something like that?
It means, it's funny because I've realized this, and I had Brianna Joy Gray on a couple of weeks ago, and this came up, and I don't remember if I brought it up. I think I did because she was saying how she dropped some Yiddish words here and there, and I said something like, "No one knows what verklempt means," and I put her on a little feature I called the Jewish hot seat, and I asked her if she knew what it was, and she said something like, I'm going to just tell you listeners, because I respect you guys. It's verklempt means moved, like emotional. A lot of people think it's overwhelmed, which those two things can overlap. But I'm going to start asking people to define the word because it's just gone too far.
It's gone too far.
It's like many.
We've had verklempt drift now.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it's gone too far. It's like, no, you can. I mean, I'm not proprietary at all with Yiddish, but I just think people need to, use it correctly.
Oh, Diet Tuna Soda, the Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode where he meets, the sex offender. That actually is a lot meaner to the sex offender than Curb Your Enthusiasm. In Curb, they present him as just like a very like nice, normal guy who happens to also be a sex offender, and people are really mean to him, except for Larry, who tries to treat him like a human being and kind of help him integrate into the community. So maybe Larry's not as bad as
That's why I think that's another example of it. Although then there's the other side, which is like he just helped him with his golf swing, so he wants to keep
that's why he's
practicing
helping
with him. Yeah. And then though the other, oh my God, then there's also built into that episode is he's trying to get to the bottom of who's stealing his newspapers.
Yeah, and he thinks it's like a doctor.
A doctor. So he invites at the very beginning of the episode. He's like, have you seen anyone? Well, first of all, the old couple, they're taking out the groceries, I think, from their car, and Larry's like, "Do you want help?" And they're like, "Yeah, that'd be great." He's like, so annoyed, but he starts helping them take out the groceries, and then he asks them if they noticed anyone taking away the New York Times from his doorstep, and they're like, yeah, we did. Or if they were getting their paper and they're like, yeah, we keep getting our paper, but we've noticed someone is taking it from your doorstep. And he's like, huh. And he thinks it's like he thinks it's a friend who's mad because he didn't give them an engagement wedding or gift or something. And then because they broke up and then they got back together. So he thinks it's him. So he asks the older couple, he's like, would you be able to recognize him if you saw him again? And she's like, oh, definitely. So he invites them to the Seder.
Yeah.
Because he's coming to that guy's coming to Seder. And when the woman comes in, she sees the sex offender and she passes out.
Yeah.
So Larry's really upset because he needs to resuscitate. He really wants her to wake up so that she can identify the doctor who he's convinced is the culprit. And so there's another very funny montage where he's like, she's lying down and Larry's like trying to wake her up and he's like clapping in front of her face and like jumping on the bed and playing a congo and yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was about to say. So another sitcom with high Jewish content in it is The League, because Nick Kroll is in it.
Oh yeah.
Nick Kroll, who I didn't come up with this. This is just reality. Who is also the child of a billionaire,
Right.
by the way.
Yeah, I know they have a foundation.
Nick
yeah.
Kroll and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, both the children of billionaires. But he have you ever seen The League?
No.
So
what is it again?
it's about this group of guys who have a fantasy football team. But the show is not about like fantasy football.
Right.
It's just like a really, good, offensive, very funny show about a bunch of like horrible people who are all very funny and mean to each other.
Okay, I'll watch it. He's pretty funny. I like that show Hello Again or Hello.
Oh yeah. If you like him
That's
in
funny.
in other stuff, you'll like him in this. He's very good. Jeff Goldblum plays his father, actually.
We got to get Jeff Goldblum. I can't say it. I want Jeff Goldblum, if you're watching this, when you're watching this, you got to come on Useful Idiots.
You have that Rolling Stone, connection.
Imprimatur. I know.
Like you can basically get anybody in the world on your show. Isn't that cool?
Well, I'll just say that sometimes we're told by some people that someone likes our show. And we're like, great, did you tell them to come on? They're like, no.
Okay, we got to get you on IMDb Pro. We got to get you to make a fake email account for your assistant.
Oh, yeah, you're
at Rolling
right.
Stone. And we need you, that assistant, to start emailing,
You're
the
right.
agents. Because with that name, Rolling Stone, like
I know.
anyone, the sky is the limit. Especially now because they're all sitting at home doing nothing or
Right.
starting their own podcast.
Right, yeah, we
streaming.
got to get them, yeah. We
Like
got to bring it to the
like
next
Henry
level. Yeah.
Cavill. Henry Cavill, the man plays Superman. He's 250 pounds of pure muscle. He's on Twitch.
Wow.
He's on Twitch.
See, should I'm conflicted if I should do Twitch or YouTube.
So
I'm going to stick to my live stream, but
Yeah.
well, what were you going to say?
Like it depends on what your goal is, because Twitch is like kind of a different beast. If your goal is to get the K Halper brand out there, let your fans and listeners know, push them to supporting you on Patreon at patreon.com/the K Halper show, then YouTube is probably fine. But you don't make money from YouTube directly yet. Maybe I think they have some kind of monetization going on, but it's not as common. People aren't as into it. Twitch, you can make money, but you need to be streaming a lot. Like you need to be. I don't know if you have to do as much as like Hassan does, who's like on like 8 hours a day every day.
Right.
But you need to be on like hours, like all the time, and ready to go in a moment. And I don't know if your show is really about that, because you have on so many guests. Like you're not going to be able to have, you'll be able to have on guests, but it'll be like much more happenstance stuff, and it has to be like more focused on you and supporting you. And like they do have like Katie, the question is like, are you willing to become an e-girl?
What's that?
So you gotta brand yourself. It's got to be about Katie Halper and the Katie Halperins, and they're going to be the ones who are donating and giving to you because they like you, not necessarily your content, not the guests. It's got to be about you, K.
Yeah,
and that works on Twitch. That's what works on Twitch when people like really like you and identify with you and just want to watch you for like 5 hours a day and aren't as concerned with the content or the topics or the guests or what you're doing, because you really can't keep that like the energy up like when you're streaming for 3 hours every day. You can't have guests. Like, I mean, maybe if you have have a whole team, like, maybe like the Majority Report, they can, do it. And they got a whole staff, they got a whole team. They can do a couple hours every day. That's fine for them. But
Right.
if you don't have that big team, you can't do like multi-guest
Right.
shows like every day. That's just
Right.
it's too much. It has to be like people who love you talking into a camera and just be
Right.
that, or showing them videos. You're very good with showing the videos, so watching video, like a lot of streamers, big name
Right.
streamers, that's their primary thing that they do. Is their audience sends them videos, they watch them, they pick out videos, and they just go through, like, it might be like an hour-long video, and they'll just go through and pause it and react, and that will be what you're doing.
But it's right. Does anyone do both?
Do both, like a mix of like interview, like
YouTube
real
show and Twitch show.
Oh, separately, or like
Yeah.
well, I don't know anybody who does them like two different things for two different platforms. I don't know anybody who does that. And the problem with Twitch is once you get to the high level, I think where you're a partner
Yeah.
level, where you have a ton of subscribers. It takes a while to get there. Tons of subscribers. You're putting out a ton of content. You're not allowed to stream that content to anything else. You have to, any content you stream to Twitch, you can only stream to Twitch. So you can't do a multi-stream if you get to partner level.
Right. But you can post it on YouTube after, right? Like if I did a stream, I could chop it up and put on YouTube after.
I think I don't know.
After
I don't
24 hours, I think, or something. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, you can post clips somewhere, but you can't do a live stream at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. I found it. I did it for a little bit, and I found it really hard to understand the like subscript, like the gifts, the coins, all that stuff.
Yeah, and you
A little
have to
overwhelming.
understand that in order to make money, you have to like set up these this little economy.
Yeah. I'm
to-
not good with finances. I don't know.
Yeah,
how
you
I
have
could,
to set up a little economy. But if you just want to kind of do a show and then monetize it in the YouTube way, that has usually been, I think that's more natural for most
Right.
political people. But like I said, someone like Hassan has made it work for
Right.
him. He came from the Young Turks, and he was able
Right.
to quit the Young Turks because he was making so much money off
And
of Twitch.
He plays video games, right?
He does a mix. Sometimes like he'll play video games. He does the debate thing, the debate me thing. I don't know if you want to get into the
What's
debate.
that?
So there's like this whole like internet subculture based around like debates. Usually like you'll have someone on the left and someone on the right, and it's the debates, and it's just like its own like little subculture thing. So you would find like a alt-right person and have them on and have a debate with them, just kind of this free-ranging 2-hour debate back and forth with them, and that's the whole thing. And Hassan does a bit of that too. I'm not. I don't really understand it. It's not really my thing. But if that's your thing, if you can talk really fast and drop a bunch of like statistics really
Right.
quickly, like that's a really that people are into that. People like watching that story stuff. Share Thought asked Katie, if you game, would you ever consider getting a gaming console and playing some video games on here?
I mean, it would be really kind of like, it could be entertaining in a way, like, because I'm so bad at it. Maybe
Yeah,
people would
some
like
people do
coach
that.
me. Oh,
Well,
they do?
it depends. It depends on your audience. I think most of your audience now would be fine with it. But if the gamers find your stream and you're bad at games, it could
What
be
do they
brutal.
do?
It could be
Demolish?
brutal. They could cancel you. They can say Katie is a fake gamer girl. She's appropriating our culture. She's
Oh,
wearing
yeah, I'll get
gamer.
canceled. Yeah.
She's wearing gamer face.
Oh my God, it's true. I am wearing gamer face. Is there like a game girl like aesthetic? Do they wear certain clothes or?
I don't know enough about. I think so, but that could just be me being like an older guy who doesn't get it. I feel
Right.
like they wear like they almost dress a little bit like ravers, but like they're always in their house, so it's kind of like weird. They dress like ravers from like circa like 2002. I feel like that's the gamer girl aesthetic mostly.
Got it. I've never done that. I've never dressed like a raver, but you could give me tips.
Yes, I definitely could.
Yeah. Overwatch. He
Oh,
hates trap. What
Oh,
is
they're
this?
talking about Destiny. Let me spill some tea about
Yeah.
Destiny. Destiny is a streamer that actually He came on. He was on a Lost episode of Struggle Session. I did not book him for the show. I didn't know much about him. I was told. I booked most of the guests of Struggle Session. The vast majority of the guests I book, the vast majority of topics I pick. This one I did not pick. This guest I did not choose, and so we invite him on. The person who booked him said, "Oh yeah, he's just really popular streamer. He's a socialist. Blah 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 blah." Get him on, and he is definitely not a socialist. He is, like, he left punches. At one point he asked us, like, "You guys aren't communists, are you?" And like, I was so uninterested. I was checked out like 5 minutes into it. Like, it wasn't my guess. I didn't book it. It wasn't my job to try and make him smart or interesting. And I just got bored with it. And we ended up never releasing it, except for like it as a like a hidden content for the really deep.
Oh, you have like multiple levels of depth.
Yeah, we posted it just on our Discord as our
Discord,
Lost.
You see,
Our Lost episode. But yeah, Destiny.
Wait, is it about Lost?
No, it was just a Lost.
Oh, I thought you did a Lost about Lost.
No, just a Lost episode with Destiny that we never released publicly. That's the only guest we had on that was like so bad we didn't release it because he sucked, and we knew he sucked. And and it took a while for him to start like sucking really hard in public. But he is one of those like debate guys. Who would have debate after debate after debate with these far right people, and that made the people think that he was on the far left when he's actually not at all.
I see.
He would debate the far right, and
from like what, center right or like libertarian.
Well, that's the thing. I say this a lot. Like, if all you say is like racism is bad, then people will start to think that you're on the left. Like, if all you're doing is like criticizing like far right and Trumpers, people start to think that, oh, your actual positive beliefs are on my side because your negative beliefs are on my side. And that's just, it was not the case from him. And he's like gone like far further, moving towards the center, and I think even to the right. At some point he was in debate with a woman, an actual like woman from Vietnam, who was explaining to him about like US imperialism, and he said something like, if communism was so great, then why, is your country suffering so bad, huh? It sounds like my system is better. And she actually said it, and her response was, well, because you bombed the shit out of us. So like, well, the fact that we were able to bomb the shit out of you suggests that our system is better.
Right.
Do we all think burning the White House down could help move America forward? Forward to what? If we're talking about accelerationism, yeah, but I could see something like that happening, and then every single resistance person coming out and saying, this is too far.
Of course,
This is not what we've been fighting for. This is not the America. Like, Lord, everyone knows how much I oppose Donald Trump and his policies, but this is just too far.
Right.
This is an attack on America, and we were trying to save America. Both Donald Trump and I agree on making America great. We both agree on that. Maybe we have different definitions of greatness, but we all agree on that. And the people who burned down the White House, these Antifa terrorists, we want nothing to do with them. Like, they'll say it because they'll believe it. They'll also say it because they be scared of like what the right would say.
Exactly.
Like that happened a lot during the Obama administration, where he would automatically like go into like a defensive posture, like a dog, like a submissive posture in anticipation of what the right would do. And I think that's what would happen.
Do you think that's like, how much do you think that's true versus he just actually had those politics? Because like, the Thomas Frank thesis of listen liberal is that like the Dems aren't just, they're not cowards. They are smart and collaborators.
I mean, it's a mix of both. I think like the Sherry Sherrod thing, that was like more like pure cowardice than like, and we know this from the quotes. For people who don't know, she was she was just some government worker, like GS, like 9 or 11, something like that. Kind of high level, but not super high level. Who would give speeches and tell this story that she would tell all the time about how this white farmer upset her, and that she like didn't want to help him as a worker because she was so upset by him, and she thought he was a racist towards her. Now Fox News aired that story while airing the second half of the story, which was that when she went back and did help him, they ended up becoming lifelong friends. And he recently passed away, and she still stays in touch with his wife. And the story was about her overcoming her like reverse racism, which would be a story that right wingers would probably love, right? You would think, but instead, like they showed on the first half on Fox News, and the Obama administration fired her before, like immediately, demand her resignation immediately before the full clip even came out, before they even really aired it on prime time, because they were going to do the big expose on prime time, and they fired her in order to get ahead of the expose. So I think that was more like just cowardice. Like they're literally, she literally said, the person who was firing her on the phone said, "You need to resign because they're going to air this on O'Reilly tonight."
Wow. What happened to her?
I think she sued. For,
we should have her on.
I mean, she was working for, I don't know. She was working
maybe
for.
Maybe that radicalized her.
Yeah, maybe it radicalized her. I don't know. Yeah, Shirley Sherrod, 2010.
God, my politics have changed. I'm so embarrassed sometimes when I
think
about
the Obama administration did apologize to her and offered her
Medal of Honor
of a position, which she declined, and she filed suit against Breitbart and Larry O'Connor for defamation, and they settled eventually in 2015. They settled.
I wonder for how much.
Yeah, it's undisclosed, but yeah.
What did you see the Jill Filipovich tweet, by the way, where she was like, maybe white anarchists should sit with this one out? Did you see that tweet?
Yes, I saw it.
Is that like cosplaying as woke while left punching?
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
What do you think of white Antifa stuff? Because there are a lot of liberals who like eat on it in a kind of like.
Oh, I thought it was a very convenient thing to deploy in order to like try to split the movement along racial lines, and it looked like it was working. It worked on a lot of people, because then as soon as you can say, oh, this is just white people, Antifa people causing this trouble, then you can turn around and ignore it. It was a way for liberals to delegitimize it and go back to brunch. Like that's what it was, and it was effective for a little bit. Like lots of high level people were saying it, even though it was complete, bullshit and fake. And then the cops, I guess, did everyone did the left a favor by like beating up some more people, maiming some more people, even killing a few more people. And then you couldn't just say that, oh, this is just Antifa causing trouble. No, it's the problem is the cops. Like I said the other day, it's like I made this parody tweet. It's like, hey, there's video of Antifa thugs kneeling on the neck of a black man until he died, while the other Antifa thugs stand guard. And like, oh wait, no, that was actually the police. Like for about a day and a half in the midst of all this, people actually seem to forget that the problem was the violence from the police, not from looters or rioters, not from outside agitators, not from Russia, not from Antifa. This started because of the police, and they at great cost, reminded people that was actually true.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the violence is like, which most of it is looting, but even if
that's not violence.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying it's not violence. So most of the stuff that they're calling violence is looting, which is not violence. But even if there were some, like, some physical, attacks on people, like that, the people doing that are not paid by our tax dollars to protect people. Like, they don't get paid to protect people, and they're breaking the law, right? If they're attacking someone, I assume. Like, the problem is that, the problem is the violence committed by, I mean, I know this is so obvious, especially, like, I don't have to tell you or our listeners or viewers, but like, it is shockingly, it's kind of shocking how much the attention is taken away from that issue. Like, we're talking about, like, I don't care. Someone could kill someone in the street. That wouldn't be okay. But let's say a protester killed someone in the street, right? Like, and that has not happened. But that doesn't mean this problem is, this protest is not based on like what some random individual does during a protest. Like, the protest is a better response to a systemic violence.
Yeah. You can't let, one bad protester spoil everything,
Right.
You can't say all protesters are violent. I mean, that's a completely ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah, you can't let it. It's like, if the worst, I mean, if the funny thing is that if the worst individual or instance defines an entire group, then they really, and they need to, and they're using that argument to shut down the protests, and obviously the police need to be disbanded.
David asks, do we somehow see anti-police brutality movement expanding to fight against U.S. empire military? I mean, it would be nice, but I don't really see that. I don't even see the anti-police brutality movement expanding to fight against the police. Like, that would be nice, instead of just like, some kind of milquetoast promises of reform. Like, real substantive change. I don't know. Especially since when you look at like the reason why the anti-war movement like kind of disappeared during the Obama administration is because the Democrats were running the wars, and so everything was fine. like that was what made it good, okay. And now, like, George W. Bush is now coming out with a hero coming out with statements. You know
what I thought could happen? I feel like maybe we could convince Trump. Two things. One is, we can try to convince Bernie to get back in, but Bernie, who we actually like. But here's the other thing. What if Trump is watching this? Trump, I know you're watching this. Why don't you punk Democrats, troll Democrats by offering some like major reforms that they'd be afraid to sign off on? Because it's too cuck a move. It's too beta a move.
Yeah, because I've been saying for a while, like, I could really see Trump running to Joe Biden. I mean, and he has said things about this. Before this all happened, like, Donald Trump put out an ad like criticizing the carceral policies of Joe Biden, with like black people like putting down Joe Biden. It was like, I really thought he was gonna pivot in that direction.
Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, like, I really thought he was going to try like be letting people out of jail and stuff. And so
I know,
because he has done that before, but I guess with this thing blowing up, it forces Trump to be firmly on the law and order side, when he could he has shown he can go either way. He can be the law and order guy, or he can be the guy letting the people out of jail that Obama didn't want to let out.
I think he should do that. Trump, if you're watching this and you feel like you're stuck, why don't you pivot?
Brian just said that Trump attacked the crime bill tonight. The man is just wild. The man will say anything.
We need to get him to throw. You know how he turns on people all the time when they criticize him?
Yeah.
We need to find one police officer to say something against Trump. Oh,
God. Yeah, that's what we need to do.
Right? And
like,
then...
Like, Joe Scarborough was like his friend, and like he started accusing him of murdering his intern, which, by the way, I don't know if it's necessarily as illegitimate as all the newspapers are saying.
Right.
But yeah, like he will turn on somebody. So I think the idea of like getting some cops to be like anti-Trump,
and then he'll be like, they're totally incompetent,
and we could
embarrassment.
Yeah, we could totally trick some cops into doing it because all they care about is saving their own bacon. So if
Right.
we
No pun intended.
yeah, because if we can convince some cops that that if they like diss Trump, that will be taking, with sincerity and like, oh, you're actually really committed to
Right.
change, then they would definitely 100% do that.
Right.
And then Trump can come back and say, you know what, I never really liked the police. I
Exactly.
think they're kinda
Pathetic.
weak."
I think they're pathetic. They're weak. Losers. They're a bunch of losers.
Yeah, none of these guys, they got their GED. None of them went
gosh,
to
he's so-
college. They're not very smart. Like the dumbest guys in my neighborhood, they all became cops.
Yeah. You could. That's basically it. Like he could do that. So why don't we have? How do we do this? We got to do this.
Well, how do we incept both some major police captain and the president of the United States
exactly,
after
yeah.
we've already said our plan
Shit.
live on stream?
Let's go. I'm gonna have to delete this. I'm gonna cut this part out. Yeah. No, but I think we're onto something.
Yeah,
we should just convince
Ian
him.
James says we could definitely get some troops to speak out against Trump, but Trump has gone to war with the troops before. Trump has fucking talked
He's
to
mad
his-
at Mad Dog, Mattis, and who else is he mad at? All these people. Yeah, I think. I mean, I just think it's like he should always always be trolling. And wait, what? Why are you saying look up suffragettes, arson, and protests? Why? Why don't you send me a link? I'm not. It so annoys. What's the point with suffragette, arson, protests? Oh, by the way, I have a very important announcement tonight about the next show. Guess who's going to be on?
Oh, who?
He's a repeat, but when I did it last time, I didn't have a lot of advance warning. So, Assad Hader.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. He's really funny.
He's elusive. He doesn't do a lot of stuff. It's hard to wrangle him. That's a big get.
That's a big get, right?
Yeah.
Big get. What's the suffragette thing? Tell Katie to look up suffragettes, arson, and protests. But I'm not saying that. Okay, sorry, I'm getting defensive because I think that people think that I'm being anti-violence or condemning the violence, which I'm not.
No.
I do think it's an interesting question of what can be done, and there needs to be, I actually heard Eugene talking about this with Rania earlier about how there's no SNCC, there's no, core. What is that? Congress on Racial Equality. SNCC is what? Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Then the SCLC, Southern Leadership, Christian Southern, all these like Martin Luther King organizations or Marion Barry organizations. I'm not just saying that because my mom briefly dated him. True story, by the way.
Oh, really? Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She also said Jonathan Lewis was very sweet, which was, she met him at they were at a core dinner she went to. She was very mad at Jonathan Lewis for throwing Bernie under the bus, though.
Oh, yeah. Trump's tweet is, Sleepy Joe Biden's 1994 crime bill was a total disaster. It was mass incarceration for black people, many of them innocent. I did criminal justice reform, something Obama and Biden didn't even try to do and couldn't do even if they did try. Biden can never escape his crime bill. That's so amazing for him to say that.
So amazing, given that he called for the death penalty to be reinstated for the Central Park Five.
Yeah, it's just, his mind is a wonder. His mind is truly a wonder. He will say anything or do anything.
Yeah. His biggest strength is his lack of he never pretended to be consistent. And that is what people who don't like him don't understand.
Yeah.
When they're like, what, how can he call Biden racist when he says, yeah, no one cares.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't pretend to be anti-racist the way that Biden pretends to be anti-racist. Same thing with Hillary Clinton. Remember, he called that her super predators comment. We should do a mashup of woke Trump moments. And then
he has one like almost like every day. He like makes one good tweet, one good diss on the Democrats that is actually holds up, and then all his reply guys like do the like they are always at a loss on those tweets to what to reply with. You, sir. Yes, Joe Biden made the crime bill, but you, sir, made this tweet 3 years ago where you lightly praised something that was in the crime bill, and so you're a hypocrite.
Right, exactly. Right? That's the response. And like literally no one cares. Yeah.
All right, Kate, I gotta roll.
All right. Yeah.
It's getting late.
It's getting late and we got some police officers to email.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's do this again. This was so long because we hadn't caught up in a while, but I'll make some good clips out of this.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Bye, Leslie. Bye, everyone. Wait. Before I leave, 9 p.m. on Sunday. So the schedule is this: 9 p.m. and Thursday nights and Sunday nights, EST. Is that you like that schedule? I hope you guys like it. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Phil. Phil's a great friend of the show. 9 p.m. Thursday nights and Sunday nights is where we're going to do live streams. Okay. And I will look into the arson stuff. And I know my point is that that's not, the word violence is being used to describe that, but it's not, I don't think it is violence. Okay.